Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became a Soul Reaper captain and got married to Yoruichi, Rangiku, and Harribel. Bleach. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Fox and the Flash. The first sensation was thirst. A deep, rasping thirst that felt as if it had been carved into the very essence of him, followed by the taste of grit and the smell of dust and old despair. It was the antithesis of his last memory, a light so absolute it had no color, a feeling not of pain, but of fulfillment, of a promise kept as the world was saved and he was unmade. Uzumaki Naruto's eyes snapped open. He wasn't in the shattered valley of his final battle. He wasn't anywhere he recognized. A sky the color of a faded bruise hung over a sprawling, ramshackle city of wood and dirt. Buildings leaned against each other like weary drunks, their timbers gray and splintered. The street was a river of packed earth, and the people were ghosts. Not literally, but their eyes held a hollow, resigned emptiness he'd only ever seen in the deepest pits of war. They drifted past him in threadbare kimonos, their forms solid but their spirits worn thin. He sat up, a motion that felt both alien and familiar. He looked down at his hands. They were his hands, calloused and strong, but they felt younger. The faint web of scars from 1,000 less in a lifetime of recklessness were gone. He felt his face. The skin was smooth, the lines of a Hokage's worry erased. He looked to be 19 again, maybe 20, caught in the prime of his physical life. He wore a simple, sleeveless black shirt and dark pants, fabrics so coarse they scratched his skin. A child, no older than 5, stumbled near him, tripped on a loose stone, and fell. Beef. Or the first sob could escape the boy's lips. A man with a scarred face and the predatory slouch of a scavenger snatched the small rice ball that had tumbled from the child's grasp. The boy's whimper was silent, his despair total. He didn't even cry out. He just accepted it. Something hot and furious coiled in Naruto's gut. It was an old, familiar friend. The anger that had always fueled him, not a blind rage, but a sharp, righteous fury at the sight of the strong preying on the weak. Hey! Naruto's voice was a low growl, rough from disuse. The scavenger flinched, turning to face him. The man's eyes widened, not at the word, but at the feeling behind it. It was like standing too close to a furnace. Put it back, Naruto said, his voice level. The man, flanked by 2 similarly ragged cronies, sneered. Or what, newcomer, you gonna cry to the Shinigami? The name meant nothing to Naruto, but the tone was universal. Naruto didn't move from his seated position. He didn't need to. He let a fraction of the power thrumming inside him leak out. It wasn't chakra. He'd known chakra like he knew his own breath. It was a warm, flowing river within him, a tool to be molded. This was different. This was a star crammed into his chest, a chaotic, boiling sea of golden energy laced with a familiar, ferocious crimson. It was his own life force, amplified 1,000 times, and fused with the lingering, spectral echo of his oldest friend. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure that made breathing a conscious effort. The dust at Naruto's feet stirred, not from a breeze, but from the sheer density of the energy radiating from him. The scavenger and his friends froze. Their instincts, honed by a lifetime of survival in this refuse heap of a district, were screaming at them. They weren't looking at a man. They were looking at a natural disaster wearing a human face. The scarred man's hand trembled. The rice ball, now coated in dirt, dropped from his fingers. He and his friends scrambled backward, stumbling over their own feet before turning and bolting into the labyrinth of alleyways, swallowed by the grim city. Naruto's presence settled. The oppressive weight vanished as he reined it in, the effort leaving him slightly breathless. It was like trying to hold back the ocean with a fishing net. He stood, walked over, and picked up the soiled rice ball. He brushed it off as best he could, then crouched in front of the small boy, who was still staring at the spot where his food had been. Naruto held it out. Here. The boy looked from the rice ball to Naruto's face, his eyes wide with a terrifyingly fragile spark of hope. He snatched it and scurried away without a word, vanishing behind a stack of rotting crates. Naruto sighed, the sound a plume of white in the chilly air. He ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair. Where the hell am I? He muttered to the empty street. He learned the answer in pieces over the next few weeks. He was in the Soul Society, the afterlife. This was the Rukongai, the massive ring of settlements where souls lived until they were either reborn or entered the Shinigami Academy. And this specific place, he was told by a fearful old woe man in exchange for a piece of scavenged fruit, was Inazuri, the 78th district of the South Rukongai. The closer you were to District 1, the more orderly and peaceful it was. The farther out you went, the more the law of the jungle took hold. Inazuri, the dog huddle, was near the bottom of the food chain. It was a place of predators and prey, and Naruto, with his incomprehensible spiritual pressure, his Ryutsu, as he learned it was called, was the biggest predator of them all. But he wasn't a predator. That was the part they couldn't understand. His presence was a magnet. The desperate and starving were drawn to the faint warmth of his power, a subconscious comfort in the cold despair of the district. The thugs and the would-be tyrants were drawn to the sheer scale of it, seeing a power to be challenged, conquered, or co-opted. The challenges came daily. Gangs, 5 at a time, then 10, then 20, came to test the newcomer with the sun in his chest. They came with rusty blades and crude clubs. They never stood a chance. Naruto fought with a brutal, instinctual efficiency. He didn't know the sword arts or the formal combat styles of this world. He knew how to fight to survive. He moved with a boxer's grace. His feet light, his form grounded. When they swarmed him, he didn't draw a weapon. He held up his right hand, and the golden energy roiling within him answered his call. It wasn't the precise, focused Rasengan he had perfected over a lifetime. It was a cruder, angrier thing. A churning vortex of raw spiritual force, the size of a melon, crackling with crimson sparks. It didn't hum, it roared. The first time he unleashed it, the result was shocking. He slammed the vortex into the chest of a charging brute, and the man didn't just fly backward. His soul, his very form, seemed to buckle under the impact before he was sent tumbling end over end, crashing through the wall of a dilapidated shack. The others froze, their eyes locked on the swirling ball of destruction in Naruto's hand. He let it dissipate, the roar fading to a whisper. Anyone else? He asked, his voice calm. They fled. Word spread like fire through the district's grimy arteries. The blonde giant in the third ward wasn't just strong. He was a monster, but a strange kind of monster. He beat down the gangs that extorted food and terrorized families, but he never killed. He drove out the predators, but he never took their territory for himself. Instead, an unintentional community began to form around him. People knew that within a few blocks of the old, abandoned textile mill where he slept, they were safe. Children could play without fear of being snatched. The elderly could rest without having their meager possessions stolen. Naruto found himself in a familiar role, a protector. He organized scavenging parties, his sheer presence enough to ward off claim jumpers. He used his strength to reinforce crumbling homes. He became the unofficial, unwilling, and undisputed leader of a small patch of forgotten souls. He learned to control his power, not through finesse, but through sheer repetition. He discovered he could coat his hands in the golden energy, forming claws of solid Ryutsu that could shred rusted metal. He could focus it into explosive bursts from his feet, launching him over buildings in a single, thunderous leap. He was a force of nature, unrefined and untutored. A genius brawler learning the physics of a new universe one punch at a time. And from the highest, most shadowed rooftops, a pair of golden, feline eyes watched his every move. Yoruichi Shihoin was bored. It was a state of being she cultivated and despised in equal measure. Her self-imposed exile from the Seraite had lost some of its thrill over the decades. Urahara was endlessly amusing with his harebrained inventions. But even his eccentricities had become predictable. The Gote 13 was a stagnant pool of tradition, its captains either too old, too rigid, or too uninspired for her tastes. So she came to the Rukongai. It was a guilty pleasure, a way to feel the pulse of the unfiltered world. She'd slip away from her cozy little life in the world of the living and wander the outer districts. A sleek black cat observing the raw drama of survival. Then, the report came through her old, clandestine channels. A spiritual pressure anomaly in South Rukongai 78. Not a hollow, Not a Shinigami. Something else. The magnitude was absurd, flagged by the Seraite's long-range sensors as something between a high-level lieutenant and a lower-tier captain, but it was chaotic, unstructured, like a wild animal. The Gote-13, ever so slow and bureaucratic, was dispatching a standard patrol to observe and report. Yoruichi, on the other hand, was there in a flash. She found the epicenter easily. It was like looking for a volcano in a field of daisies. Perched on a crumbling pagoda, she watched him. The first thing that struck her wasn't the power, though it was breathtaking, a brilliant, violent gold she'd never seen before, but his eyes. They were a piercing, impossible blue, and they held no fear. Frustration, yes. Annoyance, definitely, but no fear. She watched for weeks. She saw him dismantle a gang of 30 men with nothing but his fists and those strange, swirling vortexes of energy. He was sloppy. His movements were wide, his technique non-existent. He wasted colossal amounts of energy with every attack. But he was fast, unnervingly so for a raw soul, and his instincts were supernatural. He didn't just react to attacks, he seemed to feel them a split second before they were launched. More importantly, she saw what he did after the fights. She saw him haul a supporting beam into place for a family whose roof was collapsing. She saw him sit with a group of children, showing them how to weave reeds into small, durable baskets. She saw him face down a man twice his size who had stolen water from an old woman, and after breaking the man's arm with a single, precise twist. She saw Naruto reset the bone and wrap it himself, his voice a low lecture on the nature of strength. He's a king without a crown, she thought, her tail twitching in amusement. A general with no army. A force of chaos dedicated to creating order. He was the most interesting thing she'd seen in a century. Tonight, she decided, the observation period was over. Naruto sat on the edge of the textile mill's roof, legs dangling over the 5-story drop. The day's work was done. The food had been distributed, the latest challenge from a rival ward had been summarily crushed, and a fragile piece had settled over his small corner of hell. He stared out at the endless sprawl of Inazuri, a sea of black rooftops under the pale, unchanging sky. He felt a deep, gnawing loneliness. He missed the bright sun of Konoha, the smell of rain on leaves, the taste of Ichiraku ramen. He missed the faces of his friends, the weight of the Hokage hat, the solid, grounding presence of Hinata and his children. Here, he was strong. He was a protector, but he was utterly alone. That's quite a fire you're carrying around. Must get heavy. The voice was smooth, feminine, and laced with a playful confidence that was utterly alien to this district. It came from directly behind him. Naruto didn't startle. His senses, honed by a lifetime of ambushes, had screamed a warning a heartbeat before she spoke. Not a threat, just a presence. A presence that had appeared out of thin air, as silent and sudden as a falling leaf. He turned his head slowly. A woman stood there, silhouetted against the dim sky. She was tall, dark-skinned, with striking purple hair pulled into a long ponytail and eyes the color of molten gold. She wore a form-fitting black outfit under a simple orange jacket, and she leaned against Roof's access door with an air of casual ownership, as if she were lounging in her own private garden. "Who are you?" Naruto asked, his body tensing, the golden energy within him starting to churn. She smiled, a flash of white teeth. "A curious observer. I've been watching you, Sunshine. You make a lot of noise for a plus soul." "A what?" "A plus. A regular soul. Except," she tilted her head, our golden eyes seeming to peer right through him, "there's nothing regular about you, is there? That Ryutsu of yours, it's like a sun that rose in the wrong sky." Naruto stood up, facing her fully. Sheer density of her presence was beginning to register. She felt quiet, but it was the quiet of a deep ocean, a stillness that masked unimaginable power. She wasn't hiding it, she was just so perfectly in control that it didn't leak out. "What do you want?" he asked, his stance shifting into something more ready. "A game," she said, her smile widening. "You're fast. I've seen you move. You're like a wildcat, all instinct and explosive power. On the other hand, I'm a professional." She pushed off the door and took a step forward, her movements impossibly fluid. "Let's play tag. You're it, If you can lay a single finger on me in the next 5 minutes, I'll answer any question you have. If you can't, she let the sentence hang in the air, her eyes glinting with mischief. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Tag, you appeared on a rooftop in the middle of the most dangerous district in the Rukongai to ask me to play tag. Is that a no? She teased. A slow grin spread across Naruto's face. It was the first genuine smile he'd had in weeks. It was absurd. It was a challenge. It was a break in the bleak monotony. You're on. But when I catch you, you're answering all my questions. Confident. I like it, she purred. Your 5 minutes start, now. And she vanished. Not moved fast. Vanished. Naruto's senses flared. He spun, his eyes scanning the rooftop. Nothing. He leapt to the highest point of the roof, his gaze sweeping the surrounding buildings. There, a flicker of movement 4 rooftops away. A flash of orange. With a roar, he channeled his energy into his legs and launched. The concrete of the rooftop cracked under the force of his departure. He sailed through the air, covering the distance in a single, arcing bound. He landed with a ground-shaking thud on the target rooftop, kicking up a cloud of dust. She was already gone. Too slow. Sunshine. Her voice echoed from a street below. He looked down. She was standing in the middle of the empty street, waving up at him cheekily. He snarled in frustration and leapt off the building, plummeting toward her. He wasn't aiming to land, he was aiming to use his momentum as a weapon. As he fell, he formed a small, unstable Rasengan in his palm. He wouldn't hit her with it, but the concussive force should be enough to pin her. She just watched him come, a curious look on her face. A split second before he would have impacted the street, she took a single short step to the side. A step so fast it left a shimmering afterimage. Naruto crashed into the packed earth where she had been standing, the impact cratering the street. The Rasengan in his hand dissipated harmlessly. He shot out of the crater, his eyes blazing. What was that? That, she said, now perched on a nearby water tower, is called Shunpo. A flash step. It's about technique, not just raw power. Technique, huh? Naruto grinned ferally. Let's see how your technique handles this. He slapped his hands together. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He poured his energy into the familiar command. But the result was unexpected. Instead of perfect, solid copies of himself, 2 wavering, semi-translucent golden figures flickered into existence beside him. They were unstable, more like phantoms than clones, but they held his shape and his intent. Yoruichi's eyes widened slightly. Actual, autonomous clones made of pure Ryutsu. The level of control required was immense, even if they were unstable. This kid was more than a brawler. Get her, Naruto yelled. The 3 of them exploded into motion. The real Naruto went left, 1 clone went right, and the other charged straight up the water tower. It was a classic pincer movement. Yoruichi just laughed, a sound like chiming bells. She dropped from the tower, Flash stepped between the real Naruto and his right-hand clone, tapped them both lightly on the shoulder, and appeared on another roof 50 yards away before they even realized she had moved. 2 minutes left, she called out. Naruto gritted his teeth. This was infuriating and exhilarating. He hadn't been pushed like this in, well, a lifetime. She wasn't stronger than him, he could feel that. The sheer volume of his power dwarfed hers. But she was more refined, more efficient. She used a scalpel while he was swinging a sledgehammer. Fine, he thought, if I can't catch you, I'll just have to limit your options. He landed on a wide, flat warehouse roof. More, he roared, and this time, 10 golden clones flickered into existence around him, more stable than the first 2. Spread out. Don't let her leave the block. The clones fanned out, covering the surrounding rooftops, creating a perimeter. Yoruichi watched from her perch, a genuine smile of admiration on her face. He was adapting. He couldn't win her game, so he was changing the rules. Clever, she murmured. Naruto took a deep breath, focusing. He couldn't track her movements, but he could track her presence. He closed his eyes, sinking into the sensory state that had saved his life 100 times. He felt the dim, flickering embers of the souls in the buildings below. He felt the steady, loyal glow of his clones. And he felt her, a sharp, clear, perfectly contained pinpoint of immense energy. She was to his left. He didn't open his eyes. He gathered his golden ryutsu into his fist and punched the air. A compressed cannonball of pure force shot out, not at her, but at the rooftop behind her. The explosion ripped the flimsy structure apart. Yoruichi, caught by surprise at the tactic, was forced to leap forward, directly into the space Naruto had anticipated. His eyes snapped open. He was already in motion, his body a golden blur. For a single, breathtaking instant, they were face to face, suspended in midair between two rooftops. His hand was outstretched, his fingers just inches from her shoulder. He saw her golden eyes widen in genuine surprise. And then she smiled. In that fraction of a second, she twisted her body in a way that seemed to defy physics, her ponytail whipping around. His fingers brushed against the fabric of her jacket, the barest whisper of a touch, just as she used his own momentum to spin away, landing gracefully on the opposite roof. Naruto landed hard, skidding to a stop. His clones dissolved back into his body, their shared experience flooding his mind. A small timer she held in her hand beeped. 5 minutes, she announced. Her voice filled with amusement and something else, respect. You lose, sunshine. But, she looked down at her shoulder, where his fingers had grazed the orange fabric. Only just. Naruto was breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from adrenaline. He straightened up, a wide, exhilarated grin on his face. So, I don't get my answers. I'm a woman of my word, she said, tucking the timer away. But I'll make you a new deal. I was impressed. More than impressed, actually. Your raw power is monstrous, your instincts are razor sharp, and your ability to adapt on the fly is something I've rarely seen. She hopped down from her perch, landing silently in front of him. You're a big fish in a small, dirty pond, Uzumaki Naruto. You're trying to build a dam here with your bare hands, but this district is a swamp. You can't fix it. You can only delay its decay. She gestured out at the dark city. You have the power to protect people on a scale you can't even imagine. But raw power is useless without control, without knowledge. You're a walking typhoon, and you don't even know how to make it rain. Her golden eyes locked onto his. Tired of being a big fish in a small, dirty pond? Come with me, I'll show you an ocean. Naruto stared at her, the playful grin fading, replaced by a keen intensity. He looked past her, at the small cluster of buildings where his little community was sleeping soundly. Safe for another night because of him. He could stay. He could be their guardian, their little god, and live out this strange second life in relative peace. Or he could go with this mysterious, impossibly fast woman. He could learn what he was, what this place was. He could learn to control the storm inside him, to turn his typhoon into something he could command. LD find a bigger purpose than just holding back the rot in one forgotten corner of the afterlife. It was the same choice he had always made. Okay, Naruto said, his voice firm. I'll go with you, on one condition. Oh, Yoruichi raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. The people here, he said, his blue eyes unwavering. The ones I've been looking after. I won't leave them to be torn apart by the vultures that will move in the second I'm gone. You have to guarantee their safety. Yoruichi was silent for a long moment. She studied his face, seeing not a bargainer, but a leader making a hard choice. The unwavering loyalty, the sense of responsibility, it was the final piece of the puzzle. That's a steep price for an introduction, she said softly. Then she smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time. But I think I can make a few calls. Consider it done. She turned. We leave now. The Shino Academy doesn't wait for anyone. Not even for future typhoons. Shino Academy? Naruto asked, falling into step beside her. What's that? Quote, it's a school, Yoruichi said, a glint of mischief returning to her eyes. And you, Sunshine, are about to be its most troublesome student. Miles away, in another, quieter street of the 78th district, two figures in the black uniform of the Gote 13 moved through the shadows. One was tall and lean, a member of the 2nd Division's Onmitsukido. The other was shorter, more academic, wearing the telltale insignia of the 12th Division. The spiritual disturbance has completely vanished, Lieutenant Sasabe, the 12th Division member said, his device emitting a low, frustrated hum. The one that was so massive it registered on the long-range monitors. I can see that, Rikichi, the Onmitsukido officer replied, his voice a clipped whisper. The question is why? A signature that large doesn't just disappear. Did it move on? Was it a hollow that was purified? No signs of hollow Ryutsu. No soul fragments. It's just gone, Rikichi said, kneeling. He was running a sensor over the ground where several souls had reportedly vanished without a trace last week, long before the new, massive signature had appeared. The reports of disappearances in this specific area predate the anomaly. We thought they might be connected, but his device beeped, a sharp, inquisitive tone. Wait, I have something. He brushed away the dirt, revealing the packed earth beneath. A tiny, crystalline shard, no bigger than a fingernail, was half buried in the ground. It was obsidian black but seemed to drink the ambient light, creating a small pocket of absolute darkness around it. The energy it emitted was nothing. It wasn't just low, it was an absence, a cold that leached the warmth from the air. What is that? Lieutenant Sasabe asked, crouching beside him. I have no idea, Rikichi breathed, pulling out a pair of shielded tweezers and a containment vial. I've never recorded an energy signature like this. It feels anti-Ryutsu. He carefully reached for the shard. The moment the tweezers touched it, the crystalline structure dissolved. It didn't break or shatter. It simply collapsed into a small pile of inert, gray dust that was immediately scattered by a faint breeze. Rikichi stared at his empty tweezers, then at the spot where the shard had been. His device now read nothing but the background spiritual noise of the Rukongai. Report it, Sasabe ordered, his face grim. Report everything. The massive, vanishing signature, and this nothing. Something is happening in the outer districts. Something new. The two Shinigami vanished into the night, leaving the street empty and silent, unaware of the storm that had just been recruited from their midst, and oblivious to the far colder, far darker shadow that was beginning to fall. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Unsheathed Sun. The air in the training yard crackled with the sharp scent of ozone and the low hum of spiritual energy. 100 students stood in 10 perfect rows, their NDS held out in the precise formation for Hado number 31, Shakuho. 100 identical wooden targets stood 50 yards away. The basis of Kido is the trinity of power, focus, and incantation, lectured Gintara Ebisu. His voice is dry and rigid as the starched collar of his instructor's uniform. A perfect incantation allows for maximum effect with minimal spiritual expenditure. It is the mark of a refined Shinigami. Observe, Ebisu, a man whose every motion was an exercise in sharp, economical angles, raised his own hand. O Lord, mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams but slightly press the claws of flame. His voice was a monotone, but each word was perfectly enunciated. A ball of crimson fire, no larger than his fist, coalesced in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, it shot across the yard and struck the central target, instantly incinerating it to a fine white ash. There was no excess energy, no shockwave, no sound beyond a crisp whoosh. Perfection, he stated, not with pride, but as a simple fact. Now, all of you, begin. 99 voices rose in a mostly synchronized chant. Beside Naruto, a young noble named Saijin Kori recited the words with the flawless cadence of a practiced scholar. A neat, controlled ball of fire appeared in his hand and, a moment later, cleanly vaporized his target. Saijin gave Naruto a sideways glance, a flicker of smug superiority in his calm gray eyes. Naruto scowled. He hated this. Chanting felt like trying to sing a song by reading sheet music in a language he didn't speak. He understood the feeling, the intent behind the spell, but the words were just words. O Lord, mask of, fluttery bones and stuff, he mumbled, his brow furrowed in concentration. The raw, golden Ryutsu boiling inside him had no patience for poetry. It wanted to be unleashed, not coaxed. Just fire. Big fire. The result was not a neat ball. It was a chaotic, roaring torrent of golden flame, shot through with crimson sparks, that erupted from his hand. It wasn't a spell, it was a solar flare. The blast tore through the air with a deafening shriek and didn't just hit his target, it annihilated it. Along with the two targets on either side and the reinforced stone wall behind them, leaving a blackened, molten crater 10 feet wide. A wave of searing heat washed back over the students, singeing eyebrows and making the front rows stumble back in alarm. The yard fell silent. Every eye was on Naruto, who was staring at his still smoking hand with a mixture of frustration and awe. Ebisu's face was a mask of utter horror, as if Naruto had just performed profane graffiti on the holiest of scriptures. Uzumaki, he shrieked, his voice cracking. That was not Kido. That was a catastrophic failure of control. A vulgar display of force. You have wasted more Ryutsu in that one abomination than the entire class will use this week. But I hit the target, Naruto pointed out, gesturing to the smoldering crater where his target, and its neighbors, used to be. You destroyed a section of the academy wall. An accident, Naruto shrugged. It was a weak wall. Saijin Kori stepped forward, his posture impossibly straight. Instructor, if I may. This is precisely the issue. Uzumaki relies on brute force to solve every problem. He has the spiritual pressure fa manos grande but the finesse of a rock. A Shinigami is a blade, precise and sharp. He is a club, a clumsy, dangerous club. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Watch who you're calling a club, pretty boy. At least I get the job done. Order, Ebisu snapped, his composure fraying. Kori is correct. Power without control is a liability, not an asset. 50 laps around the training grounds, Uzumaki. And pay. Perhaps you will contemplate the virtue of discipline. As Naruto started his laps, the familiar burn in his legs a welcome distraction, he couldn't shake his frustration. It had been 6 months since Yoruichi had dropped him at the gates of the Shino Academy. 6 months of baffling rules, rigid traditions, and instructors like Ebisu who seemed to fear his potential more than they wanted to nurture it. He was a prodigy and a failure. All at once. In Hakuda, he was a god. The hand-to-hand combat instructors, grizzled veterans who valued results over form, adored him. He moved with a feral grace that couldn't be taught. His battlefield instincts turning sparring matches into one-sided routes. He could anticipate his opponent's moves before they made them, his body flowing around their stiff, formal attacks. He defeated the head instructor, a man with 2 centuries of experience, in his 3rd month. The man had simply laughed, clapped him on the back, and declared him the best Hakuda practitioner he'd ever seen emerge from the academy. But in Zanjutsu, the art of the sword, he was a disaster. The katana, or asachi as they called the bladeless practice swords, felt alien in his hands. Chi was a tool for elegant slashes and precise parries, but he held it like a baseball bat. His movements were too wide, too powerful. He'd shatter a wooden practice sword with a single clumsy block. The blade is an extension of your soul. Uzumaki. Ebisu, who also taught the introductory Zanjutsu class, would screech. Not a crowbar to pry open your opponent's guard. Saijin, of course, was a master. His movements were a fluid dance of deadly perfection, each strike and parry a textbook illustration. The rivalry between them was a constant, simmering source of tension in the first-year class. Saijin represented everything the academy valued: tradition, precision, and noble lineage. Naruto was his polar opposite, an outsider of unknown origin, a wellspring of chaotic power, and a walking, hulking affront to every established doctrine. Finishing his laps, Naruto rejoined the class just as they were dismissed. Your technique is appalling, Saijin said, falling into step beside him. He didn't say it with malice, but with the cold, analytical tone of a doctor diagnosing a disease. You will never be a true Shinigami if you cannot master the fundamentals. All that power, and you can't even perform the simplest of spells correctly. It's a waste. It worked, didn't it? Naruto countered, toweling sweat from his neck. The target's gone. You caused collateral damage and expended 100 times the necessary energy. Saijin retorted, in a real battle, against a truly powerful foe, such inefficiency would get you killed. Or worse, it would get your comrades killed. That last part hit a nerve. Naruto stopped, his blue eyes locking onto Saijin's cool gray ones. Don't you ever say I'd get my comrades killed. His voice was low, all trace of humor gone. The air around him grew heavy, the golden pressure inside him stirring like a roused beast. Saijin met his gaze without flinching, though a flicker of instinctual fear crossed his face. Prove me wrong, then. Learn control, or you will forever be nothing more than a powerful freak. He gave a curt bow and walked away, leaving Naruto standing alone, clenching and unclenching his fists. A week later, the first-year NTS were gathered in a different kind of classroom, a massive, sealed arena. The air was cold and smelled of stale magic and something else, something faintly foul and predatory. Today's lesson is practical hollow engagement, Ebisu announced, his tone even more severe than usual. It was clear he was still displeased with the hole in his wall. We are fortunate to have a guest lecturer. Lieutenant Matsumoto of Squad 10. The large double doors to the arena swung open, and she entered. Or rather, she stumbled in, a stack of papers spilling from her arms. "Oh, sorry I'm late," a cheerful, breathy voice announced. Captain was being a total slave driver, and then I couldn't decide what to wear, and you know how it is. Lieutenant Rangiku Matsumoto was a whirlwind of vibrant life in the sterile environment of the academy. Her long, wavy strawberry blonde hair seemed to float around her as she gathered her papers, and her striking beauty and frankly astonishing physique had every male student, and a fair few of the female ones, completely mesmerized. She wore her standard Shinigami uniform, but she wore it with a casual, unbuttoned flair that spoke of a personality that refused to be constrained by regulation. "All right, settle down, kids," she said, flashing a dazzling smile that made half the room swoon. "Hollows 101. They're big, they're ugly, and they want to eat your soul. Your job is to purify them before they can. Simple, right?" Her teaching style was the complete opposite of Ebisu's. She was conversational, funny, and told stories from her own experiences, her hands gesturing animatedly. She described facing a Jillian class Manos for the first time, her voice filled with a genuine excitement that made the threat feel real and thrilling. Naruto found himself leaning forward, captivated. For the first time, a lesson here felt useful. "Theory is boring, though," Rangiku announced, clapping her hands together. "Let's get to the fun part. The nerds in Squad 12 have loaned us a specimen." At her signal, a section of the floor retracted, and a large, transparent cube of what looked like solidified keto rose into the arena. Inside, a hollow thrashed silently. It was a grotesque creature, roughly humanoid, with a long, canine snout and bone-white armor covering its spindly limbs. Its mask was simple, with two empty eye sockets and a jagged hole where its heart should be. "This is a basic hollow," Rangiku explained. "Weak, dumb, driven by instinct. The barrier is reinforced with dozens of seals. It's perfectly safe. We're going to practice identifying weak points. The mask is the key. Shatter the mask, and you purify the soul. Now, who can point out the primary structural weakness on this one's mask?" Saijin's hand shot up, the point of convergence above the nasal cavity. A precise, piercing strike there would be the most efficient method of destruction. "Bingo," Rangiku grinned, pointing at him. "A textbook answer. You're a natural." Saijin preened slightly. Suddenly, a series of sharp cracking sounds echoed through the arena. Red warning lights began to flash on the surface of the barrier. "Uh-oh," Rangiku muttered, her playful demeanor vanishing in an instant, replaced by sharp focus. "That's not supposed to happen." The cracks spread across the keto cube like lightning. With a final, explosive shatter, the barrier disintegrated. The hollow, free and enraged, let out a piercing shriek that vibrated in everyone's bones. It was faster and stronger than Rangiku had described. Its claws elongated, and it fixed its empty gaze on the nearest, most concentrated source of souls, the students. Panic erupted. Students screamed and scrambled backward, a chaotic mob of black uniforms. Ebisu, to his credit, reacted instantly. "Bakudo number 61, Raikujokuro," he shouted, but in the chaos, his aim was off. The 6 pillars of light slammed into the ground behind the hollow, missing it completely. The creature lunged, heading straight for a terrified group of students huddled against the wall. Saijin, standing his ground, began the complex chant for a high-level sealing spell, his face pale but determined. "Shurigain no Yaiba, Ishi no Gotoku." It was too slow. The hollow would be on them before he finished the first verse. But something else was faster. A blur of black and gold shot past him. Naruto moved without thinking, his body running on pure, unadulterated instinct. He planted himself directly between the charging hollow and his cowering classmates. He didn't have a sword. He didn't have a spell. He had his fists. The hollow swiped at him, its bone claws sharp as razors. Naruto didn't dodge. He ducked under the swipe, the claws shearing off a few strands of his blonde hair, and slammed his palm into the creature's chest. It wasn't a Rasengan, just a focused, concussive blast of raw Ryutsu. Shohaku, the instructors called the technique in Hakuda, a palm shock. Naruto's version was like being hit by a cannonball. The hollow staggered back, shrieking in pain and fury. It wasn't enough to put it down. It swiped again, faster this time. Naruto met the strike, catching the creature's wrist. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the floor. For a moment, they were locked in a contest of pure strength. The hollow's foul spiritual pressure pressed in on him, cold and hungry. Naruto's own Ryutsu flared in response. A defiant golden sun against a tide of darkness. With a roar, he twisted his body, using the hollow's own momentum against it, and hurled the creature across the arena. It slammed into the far wall with a sickening crunch. It wasn't defeated, but it was dazed. The arena was silent save for the hollow's pained groans. The students stared, dumbfounded. Saijin's chant had died on his lips, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ebisu looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. Rangiku stood with her hand resting on the hilt of her zanpakuto, a look of profound surprise and deep assessment on her face. She had been ready to intervene. But the blonde kid, he hadn't needed her. He had reacted with the speed and decisiveness of a seasoned officer. More than that, his first and only thought had been to shield the others. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, her voice regaining its easygoing tone, though her eyes remained sharp. "Class dismissed, I think." Later, as the arena was being repaired and the shaken students were being escorted out, Rangiku found Naruto sitting alone on the steps outside, staring at his scraped knuckles. "That was some fancy moving in there, kid," she said, leaning against the railing beside him. "Just did what I had to," he mumbled, not looking at her. "No," she said softly. "You did what most people wouldn't. You ran toward the danger to protect everyone else. Most people, even Shinigami, their first instinct is to protect themselves. Yours was to protect them." He finally looked up at her. He saw past the cheerful smile and the flirty attitude. In her eyes, he saw a hint of something old and sad. A flicker of memory. "It's what you're supposed to do, right?" he asked. "If you're strong, you protect the people who aren't. That's the whole point." A small, genuine smile touched Rangiku's lips. It was different from her usual dazzling grins. This one was quieter, more real. "Yeah," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, it is." She looked out over the academy grounds. "You know, you remind me of someone I used to know." "A good someone?" Naruto asked. "The best," she replied, a shadow of melancholy crossing her features before she quickly masked it. "Anyway, that was some crazy power you used. It wasn't Kido, and it wasn't just Hakuda. What was it?" Naruto shrugged. "I don't know. It's just me." Rangiku studied him for a long moment. She saw the raw, untamed power. But now she also saw the unshakable moral core that anchored it. She saw a lonely boy with the strength of a captain and the heart of a true hero. "Well, just you, is pretty damn impressive," she said, giving him a wink. "Keep it up, kid. The Gote 13 needs more people like you." She pushed off the railing and sauntered away, her hips swaying, leaving Naruto with the ring scent of her perfume and a strange feeling of connection, a sense that she had seen the real him, and hadn't been afraid. The final graduation exam was held a year later. The top 20 students of the class were transported to the one place where their skills would be truly tested, the world of the living. Specifically, a spiritually active part of Karakura town, under the watchful, invisible eyes of several proctoring captains and lieutenants. The task was simple: patrol a designated sector and purify any hollows that appeared. The pairings were announced on site. Uzumaki Naruto and Kori Saijin, the proctor called out. A collective groan went through the other students. Naruto and Saijin exchanged a look, Naruto's one of weary resignation, Saijin's one of crisp disdain. "Fantastic," Naruto muttered. "Let us be clear, Uzumaki," Saijin said as they began their patrol down a quiet suburban street. "I will be taking the lead. I will issue the commands, and you will follow them." Your penchant for chaotic, collateral damage-inducing outbursts will not be tolerated in a live civilian area. Yeah, I get it, Your Highness, Naruto grumbled, shoving his hands in his pockets. He still carried only his Asachi. The bladeless Zanpakuto. He'd never managed to connect with it, never heard its name. It was just a dead piece of metal in his hands. An hour passed in tense silence. Then, the air grew cold. A familiar, foul pressure descended, far stronger than the training hollow from the academy. A tear in the fabric of the sky opened with the sound of ripping cloth, a garganta. From the blackness within, a monster emerged. It was a Manos Grande, a Jillian, but not a typical one. The towering, black-robed giant moved not with the usual shambling slowness, but with a predatory swiftness. Its mask was different, too. Instead of the standard cone head with a single eye slit, this one's mask was broader, flatter, with multiple glowing red eyes. It scanned the area not with mindless hunger, but with tactical awareness. A typical Jillian class, Saijin analyzed, his hand already on his Asachi. Its movements suggest higher than average intelligence. We will engage using standard anti-Jillian protocol. Bakudo number 61 to immobilize its legs, followed by a concentrated Zanjutsu assault on the lower limbs to bring it down. Once it is grounded, we strike the mask. There's no time for all that. Naruto argued, his senses screaming. It's already moving. The Manos had spotted them. Instead of a slow advance, it raised a massive hand and a Sero, a blast of concentrated spiritual energy, began to form. Aimed directly at a nearby apartment building. By the book, Uzumaki. Saijin snapped, beginning the Kido chant. Naruto ignored him. He wasn't going to let this thing fire on a building full of people. He launched himself forward, a golden blur of motion. Hey, ugly, he yelled, landing on a nearby roof. Over here. He didn't have a weapon, so he became one. He formed a Rasengan in his hand, a roaring, barely contained vortex of power, and hurled it. It wasn't a projectile technique, but the sheer force of its creation was enough to send it flying, tumbling end over end. It slammed into the Manos' shoulder. The blast ripped a chunk out of the creature's form, but it was a being made of countless hollows. The wound began to close almost immediately. But it had done the trick. The Sero dissipated. The Manos' multiple red eyes swiveled and fixed on Naruto with malevolent intelligence. It let out a deafening roar and charged, not at Saijin, but at him. You fool, Saijin shouted, his own spell ruined. You have drawn its full attention. The Manos was fast. It swung a colossal arm, forcing Naruto to leap from the rooftop. He landed in the street below. Just as the building he was on was demolished. The creature was using the environment, trying to crush him. Saijin's textbook tactics were useless against an enemy that refused to play by the rules. Plan B, pretty boy. Naruto yelled, dodging another swipe that tore up a 50-foot stretch of asphalt. Saijin was frozen for a second, his perfect plans and flawless theories crumbling in the face of raw, unpredictable combat. Everything he had learned told him what to do, but the Manos wasn't cooperating. Naruto didn't wait. He created 2 of his golden Ryutsu clones. Keep it busy, he ordered. The clones shot off in opposite directions, peppering the Manos with small, harassing blasts of spiritual energy, drawing its attention, forcing it to turn back and forth. Saijin, on me, Naruto commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that Saijin, to his own shock, found himself obeying. Naruto led him on a frantic sprint through the back alleys. It's too big and too strong to fight head-on, Naruto said, his mind racing. Processing the battlefield like he was born for it. We need to create an opening. A big one. They emerged into a small park. The Manos, having dispatched the clones, crashed through the buildings after them. I need you to hit its left knee with the strongest piercing Kido you have, Naruto ordered. Don't chant, just force it. Aim for the joint. I don't care if it's messy. Just do it when I say. Quote, that's a reckless use of energy. Saijin protested out of habit. Just do it, Naruto roared back. The Manos was closing in. Now, Saijin, grit his teeth, abandoned his lifetime of training in precision, and shoved his hand forward. Hado number 4, Byakurai. A concentrated bolt of white lightning, far larger and more unstable than he would normally cast, shot out and struck the Manos' knee. The creature roared in pain and its leg buckled, its balance thrown off for a crucial second. That was the opening Naruto needed. He had already launched himself into the air, using the Maino's own lumbering body as a series of stepping stones. He ran up its arm, dodged a clumsy attempt to grab him, and leapt towards its face. He was in midair, 100 feet up, hurtling towards the intelligent, malevolent mask. He drew his Asachi. It was cold, dead, useless. He needed more. He needed a real blade. He needed to protect this town. He needed to protect his annoying, prideful rival. He needed to prove that his strength wasn't a curse, but a gift. A promise. A vow. To shine a light in the darkness. To be the sun that holds back the night. A voice, warm and powerful, echoed in the depths of his soul. It was his own voice, yet deeper, more ancient. Shine, Taiyogen. A blinding golden light erupted from the Asachi in his hand. The bandages wrapping the hilt vaporized. The formless practice sword elongated, solidified, becoming a real Zanpakuto. It wasn't ornate or elaborate. It was a simple, perfectly balanced katana, with a plain circular guard and a hilt wrapped in pristine white cloth. But the blade itself, the blade glowed. It didn't reflect light. It created it, a soft, warm radiance like the first rays of the morning sun. It felt impossibly light in his hand, a perfect extension of his arm, his will, his very soul. Taiyogen, the sun's vow. The Maino's red eyes widened in what could only be described as fear. Naruto smiled. He brought the glowing blade down in a single, clean arc. There was no resistance. The blade passed through the Maino's mask as if it were water. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a thin, golden line of light appeared where he had cut. The line widened, and with a final, silent scream, the Maino's grande dissolved, not into dust, but into pure, white light, ascending to the sky. Naruto landed softly on the ground, his new shikai humming in his hand. The glow slowly faded, though the blade still held a faint, inner warmth. He looked at it, then at Saijin, who was staring, his mouth agape, at the spot where the monster had been. Your Zanpakuto, Saijin stammered. You achieved shikai, in the middle of a battle. Naruto just grinned, feeling the easy, powerful connection to the blade in his hand. Told you I get the job done. From a skyscraper a mile away, a figure cloaked in shadows that seemed to drink the very light around it lowered a pair of binoculars. The figure was neither Shinigami nor hollow. Its presence was a void, a chilling absence of energy. Interesting, a cold, sibilant voice whispered to the wind. The test subject was disposed of, but the result, as unexpected. A new variable, a new sun has risen in their garden. The agent watched as the academy graduates were gathered by their proctors. Inform the sovereign. The Uzumaki's soul is a priority target. He must be observed. The figure shimmered, its form dissolving not into particles, but into a patch of mobile darkness that flowed back into the shadows and vanished, leaving behind only an unnatural cold and the faintest trace of crystalline dust that quickly scattered to the wind. Back in the park, a flustered proctor was congratulating a stunned Saijin and a grinning Naruto. They had not only passed, they had graduated with the highest honors. Naruto didn't care about the honors. He just looked at the sword in his hand, a silent promise passing between him and the soul within it. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Empty Throne. 5 years felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Captain Naruto Uzumaki of Squad 4 leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning in protest. The office was sparse, practical. A far cry from the elegant calligraphy and ikebana arrangements favored by his predecessor, Retsu Unohana. The only personal touches were a small, potted plant valiantly struggling to survive on the windowsill and a stack of paperwork so high it threatened to achieve sentience. His ascension had been unorthodox. After graduation, Yoruichi's sponsorship and his own overwhelming power had seen him fast-tracked. He'd achieved a seated officer position in Squad 4, the Medical and Supply Division. It seemed an odd fit for a combat specialist, but Unohana, with her unnervingly perceptive gaze, had seen something else in him. His unique, sun-gold Ryutsu had a potent, life-giving quality. It wasn't the precise, intricate healing Kido she wielded, but a raw, vital force that could knit wounds, purge toxins, and reignite the fading spiritual energy of the gravely injured. He was a walking, talking defibrillator for the soul. He became a battlefield medic of unparalleled worth, and in time, Hana had named him her lieutenant. He was respected, if still seen as an oddity. A boisterous, ramen-loving powerhouse who could restart a patient's heart with a gentle touch. ND then go spar with Kenpachi Zaraki until half the Seraite was a cratered wasteland. His friendship with Rangiku had deepened into a comfortable, easy bond. They often drank together after long shifts, her lamenting Captain Hitsugaya's endless paperwork and his complaining about the sheer volume of forms required to requisition more bandages. She leaned on his steady presence, and he found in her cheerful company a balm for the lingering loneliness of being a world away from home. She was one of the few who didn't just see the monster of power or the hero of the Gote 13, she saw the man missed his friends and still wasn't quite sure how he fit into this strange new life. His relationship with Yoruichi was something else entirely. It was a secret flame burning in the shadows of the Seraite. It was stolen moments on moonless nights, breathtaking races across the silent rooftops, and passionate encounters in the hidden training grounds of the Shihoin Manor. She challenged him, teased him, and pushed him to be sharper, faster, smarter. She was the whetstone against which he honed his instincts, the one person who could match his pace. Theirs was a connection forged in mutual respect for each other's power and a shared rebellious spirit that chafed under the Gote 13's stuffy traditions. He was the only one who could keep up with her, and she was the only one who had never been afraid of his fire. Having fun, Lieutenant. Naruto looked up from his paperwork nemesis. Captain Hana stood in the doorway, her usual serene smile on her face. But her eyes, as always, held a depth that hinted at something far more ancient and dangerous than her gentle demeanor suggested. "This stuff is going to kill me faster than any hollow, Captain," he groaned, gesturing to the stack. "I swear, Central 46 must be powered by the souls of bored Shinigami who died filling out Form 22B. Hana's smile widened slightly, an astute observation. "However, it may have to wait. An urgent captain's meeting has been called. Put on your haori. We are needed." The change in her tone was immediate. The gentle warmth was gone, replaced by the cool efficiency of a commander. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his own playful demeanor vanishing. He shrugged on the white haori of a lieutenant, the Squad 4 insignia on its back feeling both familiar and like a borrowed coat. The Medan G Hall of the 1st Division was already buzzing with tense energy when they arrived. The captains of the Gote 13 stood in their customary 2 rows, a gathering of the most powerful souls in existence. Naruto took his place behind Hana, his eyes scanning the room. Shunsui Kyoraku, ever relaxed, offered him a lazy wink. Byakuya Kuchiki stood like a statue carved from ice and arrogance. Kenpachi Zaraki grinned at him, a silent promise of a good fight later. Captain Commander Yamamoto stood before them, his ancient eyes closed, his hands resting on his cane. "An intruder," he announced, his verses. "OICE the rumble of stone grinding on stone." In Karakura town, a murmur went through the captains. Intruders were common. An urgent, all-hands meeting was not. "This is no mere hollow," Yamamoto continued, his eyes snapping open, blazing with power. "An hour ago, a spiritual signature of immense power appeared. It is an Arankar, one of a strength we have not encountered before." Lieutenants Chojiro Sasaki, Marekio Omeda, and Izuru Kira were the first to respond. He paused, the silence stretching into a heavy, damning weight. They were defeated. Instantly, a wave of shock rippled through the room. 3 lieutenants, taken down in moments. "The intruder calls himself the Regent," Yamamoto stated. "His goal is unknown. His power is abnormal. Reports from a terrified Kira-kun state that his Ryutsu does not clash with theirs. It unravels. Captain Kuritsuchi Mayuri of the 12th Division cackled, his painted face a terrifying mask of scientific glee. "Fascinating. A reishi deconstruction property. I must have a sample." "This is no time for your experiments, Mayuri," Captain Kenzuki Guro of the 11th Division snarled. Kenzuki was a mountain of a man, Kenpachi Z. Araki's predecessor and a warrior who believed any problem could be solved with overwhelming force. His face was a roadmap of scars, and his Ryutsu was a constant, barely contained explosion of raw killing intent. "Let me go. I'll rip this Regent, in half. Your brute force will be ineffective if your spiritual power dissolves on contact, Kenzuki, Captain Yukitaki countered, his calm voice punctuated by a soft cough. Captain Unohana, Yamamoto said, his gaze settling on her. Your squad is to lead the response. The primary mission is the recovery of the downed lieutenants and the protection of the civilian populace. Engage the target only if necessary. I want him contained, studied. Understood, Captain Commander, Unohana bowed. She turned. Lieutenant Uzumaki, you are with me. Your abilities will be essential for stabilizing the others. Yes, Captain, Naruto affirmed, his mind already racing. Unraveling Ryutsu. It sounded like a nightmare. The pristine, ordered streets of Isaraite gave way to the chaotic urban sprawl of Karakura town. The Senkaimon gate closed behind them, and the scene was one of panicked evacuation. Human souls, invisible to most, were fleeing in terror. The air itself felt thin, frayed, as if the spiritual fabric of the world was being pulled apart at the seams. They found the lieutenants in a ruined shopping district. Omaeda was unconscious, his large body covered in strange, gray patches where his spirit body seemed to be flaking away. Hiro was awake, but barely, his Zanpakuto, Wabisuke, lying inert beside him, its spiritual light extinguished. Sasaki was leaning against a shattered fountain, his uniform in tatters, a look of profound shock on his face. Captain Unohana, he gasped. Save your strength, Chojiro, Unohana said, her hands already glowing with green healing Kido. Naruto was already kneeling beside Kira. Hey, Izuru, hang in there. He placed his hands on Kira's chest. A wave of pure, golden energy flowed from him, warm and vibrant. It wasn't Kido, it was life itself. The gray, flaking patches on Kira's skin receded, his breathing steadied, and the light of his spirit began to return. He just touched me, Kira whispered. His eyes wide with horror. My Ryutsu, it just came apart. Like a threadbare cloth. It's all right. You're safe now, Naruto assured him, moving on to Omaeda. There you are. The voice was calm, cultured, and utterly devoid of emotion. It came from the sky. They all looked up. Floating 100 feet above them was the Urankar. He looked deceptively unassuming. He was tall and slender, with pale skin and sharp, intelligent features. His jet black hair was slicked back, and the remnants of his hollow mask formed a jagged, crown-like fragment on his left temple. He wore a pristine white uniform, reminiscent of a royal courtier, and the hole in his chest was a perfect, neat circle. He was watching them with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing an insect. This was the regent, more Shinigami, he said, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity. And a captain, no less. Your spiritual pressures are quite robust. I wonder how long they will last. Before anyone could respond, a red torrent of spiritual energy erupted from the street below. You talk too much, Captain Kenzuki roared. He had followed them, disobeying Yamamoto's orders to stand down. With him were a dozen of his most battle-crazed squad members. Squad 11, kill him, Kenzuki. No, Unohana shouted, but it was too late. The men of Squad 11, with Kenzuki at their head, launched themselves at the regent. The Urankar didn't even move. He simply raised a single, gloved hand. As Kenzuki's massive Zanpakuto came swinging down, a blade that could cleave a mountain, the regent met it with his open palm. There was no clang of steel on steel. There was no explosion of energy. There was only a horrifying, grinding silence. Kenzuki's eyes widened in disbelief. His blade, his pride and joy, the Zanpakuto he had wielded for 500 years, was visibly dissolving. Not shattering, but flaking away into dull, gray particles, starting from the point of contact. The effect raced up the blade toward his hands. What is this sorcery? He growled, trying to pull back, but the regent's grip was unbreakable. It is not sorcery, the regent said, his voice still a placid monotone. It is order. Your spiritual energy is a chaotic, temporary construct. My power returns it to its base, unordered state. It is a form of entropy. A release. The unraveling effect touched Kenzuki's hands. He screamed, a sound of pure agony as his own spiritual body began to discorporate. The regent's other hand shot out, impossibly fast, and plunged into Kenzuki's chest. A captain's Ryutsu is a fine vintage, the regent murmured. He pulled his hand back, and Kensuke Guro, the fearsome, seemingly invincible captain of Squad 11, simply fell apart. He crumbled into a cloud of gray dust that scattered on the wind. His Zanpakuto disintegrating along with him. His squad members, frozen in midair by the sheer horror of what they had witnessed, suffered the same fate a moment later as the regent made a casual, sweeping gesture in their direction. Silence. The entire shopping district was utterly silent. A captain of the Gote 13, one of the most powerful beings in the Soul Society, had been erased from existence as if he were nothing more than a chalk drawing in the rain. Unohana stood protectively in front of her recovering lieutenants, her hand on her Zanpakuto, her serene expression replaced by one of grim, lethal focus. The air around her grew cold, the pressure dropping as she released her own immense Ryutsu, a suffocating wave of killing intent that would have made lesser men pass out. The regent actually looked impressed. Ah, now this is a proper spiritual signature. Retsu Unohana, the first Kenpachi. I have read of you. You were a relic of a more interesting time. Shall we see if your legend holds up to scrutiny? He descended slowly, landing softly on the broken pavement. He began to walk towards them. Unohana prepared to release her blade. Captain, get them out of here. Naruto's voice was a low, dangerous growl. He stepped forward, placing himself between Unohana and the advancing Arankar. Lieutenant, stand down, Unohana ordered, her voice sharp. You cannot face him. Your job is to save the injured. My job is to give you the time to do it, Naruto countered, not taking his eyes off the regent. The golden Ryutsu around him was no longer a gentle, healing warmth. It was a blazing, violent inferno, pushing back against the encroaching, unraveling presence of the regent. I'm the only one here with enough raw power to burn through whatever he's doing. Now go. Unohana hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between protocol and the undeniable truth in his words. She looked at Naruto's back, broad and determined, a shield of defiant gold against the encroaching gray death. She made her choice. Be safe, Uzumaki, she said softly, then turned. We are retreating. With a series of flash steps, she gathered the injured lieutenants and vanished. Now, it was just Naruto and the regent. A noble sacrifice, the regent observed, his tone holding the faintest hint of something that might have been admiration. But a futile one. Your energy is vast, I will grant you that. It is like a crude, inefficient star. But even stars burn out. I've been hearing that my whole life, Naruto said, his hand closing around the hilt of his Zanpakuto. Hasn't happened yet. Let us test that theory. The regent disappeared. Naruto didn't need to see him. He felt the shift in the air, the pinpoint focus of that entropic power directly behind him. He spun, his own blade already moving. Shine, Taiyogen. His katana erupted in a brilliant, blinding golden light. It met the regent's outstretched hand, and this time, there was a reaction. A high-pitched screech, like tearing metal, echoed through the street as Naruto's solar Ryutsu clashed with the Arankar's unraveling power. Taiyogen wasn't dissolving. The sheer, overflowing life energy pouring from the blade was actively resisting the decay, burning it away. Naruto pushed, forcing the regent back a step. The Arankar's calm expression finally broke, replaced by one of genuine surprise. Impossible, he breathed. Your energy, it is not just resisting. It is creating. It is reinforcing its own structure faster than I can deconstruct it. That's the great thing about having a lot of it, Naruto grinned. Though sweat was already beading on his brow, the effort was immense. He could feel his power being drained at a prodigious rate, like pouring water into a sieve made of acid. The fight began in earnest. It was a blur of motion and a clash of opposing philosophies made manifest. The regent moved with an effortless, deadly grace, each touch, each gesture, a potential death sentence. Naruto fought with a wild, unpredictable fury, his glowing blade a shield and a sword, his every move backed by an ocean of golden power. He coated his free hand in a claw of Ryutsu, lashing out, forcing the regent to dodge. He slammed a Rasengan into the ground, using the explosive force to create distance. He was holding his own, but he was losing. He was a furnace trying to outburn a black hole. For every attack he landed, the regent only needed to make contact once. A graze on his arm left a patch of gray, his uniform and a layer of skin flaking away before his own power could rush in and repair the damage. He was being worn down, eroded. The regent sidestepped a wide slash and touched 2 fingers to Naruto's chest. The impact was negligible, but a wave of nauseating cold spread from the point of contact. Naruto gasped, stumbling back, clutching his chest. His own Ryutsu felt sluggish, tangled. "Your energy is potent, Shinigami," the regent said, advancing slowly. "But it is anchored to a soul. A finite vessel. I am a concept. An ending. You cannot fight entropy." He raised his hand for the final blow. "The atonement is coming. The false throne of your soul king will fall, and the universe will be returned to its proper, silent state. Your struggle is meaningless." Naruto was on one knee, his vision blurring. He was out of his league. The man, the thing, in front of him was on another level entirely. His Shikai wasn't enough. His power wasn't enough. "The false throne will fall." The words echoed in his head. He thought of the Seraite. He thought of Ebisu, the annoying, rigid instructor he had protected. He thought of Saijin, the rival who had come to respect him. He thought of Unohana's quiet strength. He thought of the laughter in Rangiku's voice as she complained about her captain. He thought of the glint in Yoruichi's golden eyes as she challenged him to another race. His home, his friends, his family, he would not let them fall. He would not let them be unraveled and turned to dust. A deep, primal roar erupted from his chest, a sound that was not entirely his own. It was laced with the ancient, furious echo of the tailed beast that had been his partner for a lifetime. The golden Ryutsu inside him didn't just flare, it detonated. Crimson energy, raw and untamed, bled into his golden aura, twisting and churning. The ground beneath him cracked. The air superheated. The regent stopped his advance, his eyes widening in actual shock as the sheer volume of spiritual pressure erupting from Naruto skyrocketed, doubling, tripling, climbing to a level that dwarfed his own. What is this power? Naruto rose to his feet, his head bowed. "You want to talk about endings," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. "You want to see what a real ending looks like." He looked up, and his eyes were no longer blue. They were crimson, with slitted pupils, burning with incandescent rage. "You who would unravel the world, I'll show you the power that holds it together." He raised his glowing sword to the heavens. Bankai. The world went silent. All sound, all light, all energy seemed to be drawn into him. Kyubi no Kami, Taiyogen. 9-tailed god, sun's vow. There was no explosion. There was an unveiling. A sun was born in the middle of Karakura town. A colossal avatar of pure, blinding golden energy erupted into existence around Naruto, taking the form of a gigantic 9-tailed fox, its outlines burning with the intensity of a star. Naruto stood at its heart, no longer just wielding his power, but becoming it. He wasn't cloaked in it, he was the cloak. His body was a silhouette against the impossible brightness, and 9 massive, flowing tails of pure energy drifted behind him, each one a conduit of unimaginable power. The regent was thrown back, his body skidding across the pavement, not from a physical force, but from the sheer, overwhelming pressure of Naruto's released state. His unraveling aura, which had seemed so absolute moments before, was being actively suppressed, burned away by the raw, creative, life-affirming energy of the Bankai. This is a Bankai. The regent stammered, his composure shattered. "This is not the power of a Shinigami. This is the power of a god." "Close enough," Naruto's voice boomed, seeming to come from the avatar itself. He didn't move, he simply directed one of the 9 tails. It swept down like the hand of a deity, impossibly fast. The regent tried to meet it, to deconstruct it, but it was like trying to drink the ocean. The tail, a river of pure, condensed solar fire, slammed into him. The resulting explosion was visible from the Seraite. It vaporized half a square mile of the ruined cityscape, carving a massive, glassy crater into the earth. When the light faded, Naruto stood in the center of the crater, his Bankai receding, the golden avatar fading away until he was just himself again, breathing heavily, his clothes singed. His Zanpakuto returned to its Shikai state, glowing softly. Of the regent, all that remained was the jagged fragment of his hollow mask, lying on the fused glass. As Naruto watched, it began to dissolve into the familiar gray dust. But before it vanished completely, A faint, sibilant whisper echoed in his mind, the regent's final, dying thought. The atonement is coming. The false throne will fall. The Shokuzai will feast upon the king. The mask crumbled to nothing. Shokuzai. The atonement. Naruto frowned, pocketing the name. It felt important. A moment later, a dozen Senkaimon gates opened. The entire Gote 13, it seemed, had arrived. Yamamoto, Kiraku, Yukitaki, Byakuya, they all stared, their faces a mixture of awe, shock, and no small amount of fear, at the scale of destruction. They saw the crater, felt the lingering, mind-boggling Ryutsu, and saw Naruto standing alone in the middle of it all. Later, in a tense meeting of the Gote 13, the facts were laid bare. Captain Kensuke Guro was dead. An unknown, impossibly powerful Arankar had been the cause. And Lieutenant Naruto Uzumaki had not only faced this enemy alone but had obliterated it by unleashing a Bankai of unprecedented scale and power. The throne of Squad 11, the most violent and battle-hungry squad, was empty. The law is clear, Shunsui Kiraku said, his usual lazy demeanor gone, replaced by a rare seriousness. A Shinigami who can or form Bankai is eligible for a captaincy. To become a captain, one must either pass the captain's proficiency test, or defeat a current captain in single combat before no less than 200 members of their division. He looked at Naruto, who stood before the assembled captains, looking exhausted but resolute. Kensuke is gone, and Uzumaki here has demonstrated a Bankai powerful enough to alter the very landscape. I, Captain Shunsui Kiraku of the 8th Division, nominate Lieutenant Naruto Uzumaki to take the captain's proficiency test for the captaincy of the 11th Division. I second the nomination, Jashiro Yukitaki added, his voice firm despite his frail health. A wave of protests erupted from the more traditionalist captains, led by Soifon of the 2nd Division. He is an outsider. His power is unstable. He is a brawler, not a leader. To give him command of the Kenpachi squad is madness. He is a hero who saved countless lives and avenged a fallen comrade, Shunsui countered calmly. And his power, while vast, was used to protect, not to destroy indiscriminately. Is that not the very definition of a captain? The argument raged, but Yamamoto silenced it with a single, sharp tap of his cane. He will be tested, the captain commander declared, his ancient eyes fixed on Naruto. Here, now, Uzumaki Naruto, face me. Show me the control behind this awesome power. Show me you are worthy of a captain's howry. The air in the room became so heavy it was hard to breathe. The captain's proficiency test, a one-on-one combat trial against the most powerful Shinigami in history. Naruto met Yamamoto's gaze. He was exhausted, his spiritual reserves scraped raw from the Bankai. But he didn't waver. He drew Taiyogen, its golden light a soft comfort. I'm ready, he said. The clash of the old guard and the new wave was about to begin, and the Gote 13 would never be the same. The throne of the 11th was empty, and a sun was rising to claim it. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Queen and the Sovereign. The howry of the 11th Division was heavy. It wasn't the weight of the fabric, but the crushing weight of tradition. The 11th was the soul of combat in the Gote 13, a snarl. Beast of a squad that valued strength above all else. Its captains were not merely leaders, they were legends, titans of battle who earned the title of Kenpachi, the strongest Shinigami. While Naruto's official title was captain, the whispers in the barracks and training yards were constant. Is he the next Kenpachi? He hadn't fought Zaraki for the title. Yamamoto's test had been less of a battle and more of an intense, overwhelming examination of his will. The old man hadn't even drawn his sword. He had simply released a fraction of his Ryutsu, a crushing, infernal pressure that felt like being submerged in magma. And ordered Naruto to withstand it. He had ordered Naruto to demonstrate control, to prove his Bankai wasn't just a wild, destructive tantrum. Naruto, battered and drained as he was, had met the challenge. He didn't activate his Bankai. Instead, he'd called upon Taiyogen's Shikai, its steady, life-giving light a bastion against Yamamoto's suffocating pressure. He'd stood his ground, not through defiance, but through sheer, unshakable endurance. He had proven his spirit was as strong as his power. It was enough. He was granted the captaincy, a decision that sent CK waves through the Seraite's rigid political landscape. His new squad was a pack of wolves, and they smelled blood. They saw their old captain, Kenzuki, erased, and a new, outsider captain installed by the top brass. They saw his origins in the soft 4th Division as a weakness. They saw a target. The first week, he faced over 200 challenges. From low-seated officers to his own third seat. They came at him in the training pits, in the mess hall, in the hallways of the barracks. They came one at a time and in snarling groups, desperate to test the mettle of their new leader. Naruto met every single one. He never drew his sword. He used only Hakuda, his movements a blur of orange and black. He was a whirlwind of controlled force, his fists and feet striking with the force of piledrivers. He didn't brutalize them. He dismantled them. A precise nerve strike to paralyze an arm, a leg sweep to break a stance, a palm heel to the chest that knocked the wind out of them and sent them sprawling. He was always holding back, his control absolute. He defeated them all, without fail, without drawing blood. His lieutenant, a fierce, spirited woman with pink hair and an eye patch named Yakiru Kusajishi, was his most vocal supporter, often cheering him on from the sidelines with childish glee. His third seat, Akaku Madarame, a bald, battle-crazed warrior with a hidden bankai, was the last to challenge him. Their fight had leveled a training ground. Akaku had come at him with everything he had, and Naruto had met him head-on, their clash of fists echoing like thunder. In the end, Akaku was on his back, laughing breathlessly, staring at the sky. "All right," Akaku had wheezed, a wide, bloody grin on his face. "You'll do." From that moment on, the 11th was his. They were still a pack of wolves. But now he was their alpha. They respected his strength, were baffled by his mercy, and were intrigued by his refusal to conform. He sat now in the captain's office, which was even sparser than his old one. It was just a room with a desk. The 11th didn't believe in paperwork. Naruto had been trying to change that, with minimal success. "It's a stupid idea." Naruto looked up. Rangiku was leaning in his doorway, arms crossed under her chest, a frown on her face. She'd come by, as she often did, under the pretense of delivering inter-squad communiques, but really just to check on him. "You're going to have to be more specific," he said, gesturing for her to come in. "Most of my ideas are stupid. It's part of my charm." "The Hawako Mundo mission," she said, her voice serious. She sat in the chair opposite his desk. "Naruto, it's insane. The Gote 13's policy is clear. We monitor Hawako Mundo. We cull the herds when they overflow. We don't go there to talk. And look where that policy has gotten us." Naruto countered, leaning forward. "A new Urankar powerful enough to kill a captain shows up on our doorstep. We had no warning, no intelligence. We're fightin' a war of extermination against an entire world we know nothing about. It's not just stupid, Rangiku, it's inefficient. So your plan is to walk into the enemy's fortress and ask for a cup of tea?" She shot back, her voice laced with worry. "They will kill you on sight. This Harribel, the so-called queen of Hawako Mundo, she's an Espada-level Urankar. A Vasto lord, she commands an army." "Good," Naruto said simply. "That means she's a leader. Leaders can be reasoned with. Killing an endless stream of mindless hollows is a waste of time and energy. But making a pact with their ruler, that could end the conflict on a whole new level." He saw the deep concern in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide behind her exasperation. "I'll be fine," he said softly. "I'm not going alone. I'm taking Akaku and Yumachika. It's a small, fast team, in and out. You're not a diplomat, Naruto. You're a sledgehammer." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Just be careful. I don't want to have to tell Toshiro he has to do your paperwork because you got yourself eaten." He grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it. The paperwork alone is enough to make me fight my way back from the dead." Later that night, on a high rooftop overlooking the Seraite, he met with his other confidant. Yoruichi appeared out of the shadows, a silent, graceful wraith. "So, the little fox is going to visit the wolves in their own den," she said. Her golden eyes glinting. She wasn't worried like Rangiku. She was intrigued, excited by the sheer audacity of his plan. "Central 46 will have your head for this. Going to the low world without authorization is a capital offense. Only if they find out," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the pale, distant moon. And only if I fail. You think this queen of theirs will listen? I don't know, he admitted. But I have to try. The regent, the thing that killed Kenzuki, he mentioned something before he died. The atonement, the Shokuzai, he said they were coming for the Soul King. It wasn't just a random attack. He was a herald for something else. If there's a third player on the board, we can't afford to be fighting the Hollows at the same time. A truce, even a temporary one, could be the only thing that saves us. Yoruichi grew serious. Shokuzai. I've never heard that name. But if what you're saying is true, this is bigger than Gote 13 policy. You might be right. She reached out and playfully flicked his nose. But you're still an idiot. A brave, powerful, well-intentioned idiot. My best qualities, he grinned. She moved closer, her playful demeanor softening. Don't get yourself killed, sunshine. I've spent years looking for someone who could keep up with me. It would be terribly inconvenient to have to start over. Her hand rested on his chest, over his heart. He could feel the warmth of her palm, a stark contrast to the cool night air. He covered her hand with his own. I'll be back before you know it, he promised. And then, you owe me a race. To the top of Yamamoto's office. Her laughter was a low, throaty purr. It's a date. Hawako Mundo was a world of stark, bleached white and eternal night. A bone-white desert stretched to an IM. Possible horizon under a black sky with a perpetually full, unmoving moon. Quartz-like trees dotted the landscape, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for a sky that offered no comfort. The air was thick with a static charge of dense, chaotic reishi. Naruto, flanked by Ikaku and his partner Yumichika Yasugawa, stood on a high dune, surveying the bleak landscape. They had used a Garganta. The same dimensional tiering method as the Hollows, opened for them by reluctant Kazuki Urahara at Yoruichi's behest. So this is it, Ikaku grunted, a bloodthirsty grin on his face. The air itself feels like a fight waiting to happen. I love it. It's dreadfully monochromatic, don't you think? Yumichika lamented, striking a pose. Not a hint of color. It completely clashes with my beautiful feathers. He adjusted the plumage on his uniform. Focus. You too, Naruto said, his senses on high alert. He could feel them, countless hollow presences, scattered across the desert like hungry sharks circling in the deep. And one, far in the distance, a colossal pillar of power that could only be their destination. Las Noches is that way. Let's move. They didn't walk. They ran, their shun. Ho kicks stirring up clouds of white sand. They were a tight, fast-moving unit, but in this world, stealth was impossible for beings of their power. They were three bright flames in a world of shadows, and the shadows were stirring. The first attack came without warning. The sand erupted around them, and a dozen scorpion-like hollows, each the size of a carriage, burst from the ground, their stingers crackling with energy. Finally, Ikaku roared with delight, drawing his Zanpakuto. Let's dance. Hold on, Naruto commanded, holding up a hand. He stepped forward, his own hand resting on Taiyogen's hilt, but he didn't draw it. He just let his Ryutsu flare, a controlled but massive wave of golden power that washed over the desert. It wasn't an attack, it was a declaration. I am here, I am this powerful, and I am not your enemy. The hollows froze. They were creatures of instinct, and their instincts were screaming at them that the being before them was not prey. Naruto focused his gaze on the largest of the scorpions. The pack leader. He didn't project malice, just overwhelming, undeniable presence. We are not here to hunt, his voice echoed across the dunes, calm and powerful. We seek an audience with Harribel. Take us to her. The hollows hissed, their stingers wavering. They could sense his power, but the command to stand down was alien to them. One, unable to control its predatory drive, lunged. Naruto didn't move. The hollow was 10 feet from him when a blur of motion intercepted it. Ikaku, moving with lightning speed, slammed the blunt side of his blade into the hollow's head, sending it crashing into the sand, stunned but alive. The captain said stand down. Ikaku growled at the dazed creature. The demonstration was clear. They had the power to destroy them effortlessly but had chosen not to. The pack leader let out a series of clicking noises, then turned and began to scuttle towards the distant fortress. The others followed, keeping a wary distance from the three Shinigami. They had their escort, Las Noches was a fortress of impossible scale, a white monolith that scraped the black sky. As they approached, 3 figures descended from the heavens to block their path. They were Arankar, female, and their spiritual pressures were immense, easily on par with a Gote 13 lieutenant. "That is far enough," Shinigami, the one with the appearance of a lioness, announced. Her voice a low growl. This was Apache. "State your purpose," the one with the snake-like features hissed. This was Sung Sun. "Or be destroyed," the deer-like one added, her tone cool and analytical. This was Mila Rose. They were Harribel's Fracken, her most loyal retainers. "We are here to speak with your queen," Naruto said, stepping forward. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, captain of the Gote 13's 11th Division. The Gote 13 sends its assassins to our doorstep and calls it diplomacy." Mila Rose sneered. "We are not fools. If I were an assassin, you'd already be dead," Naruto replied, his voice flat. Without arrogance. It was a simple statement of fact. His golden Ryutsu pulsed once, a silent, crushing wave that made the 3 Arankar flinch. They were strong, but he was on an entirely different plane of existence. "We have no quarrel with you," he continued. "Our quarrel is with a common enemy. One that threatens your world as much as it does ours." "Lies," Apache roared, unable to contain her aggression. "All Shinigami are the same. You exist only to slaughter us." She vanished in a burst of sonido, appearing behind Naruto, her hand transforming into a wicked, bone-white blade. She swung. Her blade stopped an inch from Naruto's neck, caught in the grip of his bare hand. He hadn't even turned around. The force of her attack, enough to shatter steel, had been stopped cold. "I said," Naruto's voice was dangerously quiet, "we have no quarrel." He tightened his grip, and the bone blade began to crack under the pressure. Apache cried out in pain and surprise. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed her back towards her comrades. "Enough," a new voice commanded. It was calm, powerful, and resonated with the authority of a true sovereign. Dessen. Ding from the highest tower of Las Noches was Tear Harribel. Her presence was a force of nature, a vast, controlled ocean of power. She was tall, dark-skinned, with blonde hair and striking green eyes. The remnants of her mask covered the lower half of her face, and her Arankar uniform was zipped up to reveal a tantalizing portion of her midriff, at the center of which was the hollow hole, and just above it, the number 3, tattooed on her breast, marking her as the 3rd Espada. She landed silently before them, her gaze sweeping over Naruto, Akaku, and Yumachika. Her eyes lingered on Naruto. She could feel it, the sun-like power, the absolute confidence. This was no mere captain. This was an equal. "I am Tear Harribel," she said, her voice muffled slightly by her mask. "You are brave, or foolish, to come to my home, Shinigami." "Why are you here?" "I'm here to offer you a deal," Naruto said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "A truce." The word hung in the silent, charged air. Harribel's Fracken looked at him as if he had sprouted a second head. "A truce." Harribel's eyes narrowed. "The Shinigami do not make truces with hollows. They butcher them." "I'm not most Shinigami," Naruto said. "I believe this endless war is a waste. You protect your people, I protect mine. We are both sovereigns in our own right. But there is a third power, a shadow, that seeks to destroy us both. They call themselves the Shokuzai. One of their agents, an Arankar called the Regent, attacked my world. He was a harbinger of a greater invasion." Harribel was silent, but he could see in her eyes that she was listening. The name, Shokuzai, was unknown to her, but the idea of a third faction resonated with unexplained disappearances and strange energy signatures she herself had noted in the far reaches of her desert kingdom. "And you expect me to believe the words of an enemy?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "I don't expect you to believe my words," Naruto replied. "I expect you to believe my power." In that instant, he challenged her, not with a shout, but with a look. A silent invitation. A battle not of good versus evil, but of sovereign versus sovereign. A test of strength to establish mutual respect. Harribel understood. This was the language of Hueco Mundo. Power was the only truth. "You wish to prove your conviction," she stated. She drew her massive, shark-like Zanpakuto, Tiburon. "Very well. Show me the weight of your words, captain of the Gote 13. Akaku, Yumachika, stay back," Naruto ordered. "This is between us." He drew Taiyogen. Shine. The blade lit up with its signature golden glow. A beacon of light in the stark white desert. The two sovereigns clashed. Their battle was not a frantic scramble for survival. It was a majestic, brutal dance of immense power. Harribel's movements were fluid and powerful, like a great shark moving through water. She released her blade, Hunt, Tiburon, and her power skyrocketed, her form changing, becoming more bestial, more powerful, a true warrior queen. She commanded water, launching high-pressure torrents and blades of liquid that could slice through mountains. Naruto met her head-on. He didn't use his Bankai. He didn't need to. He moved with a speed that rivaled her Sonido, his golden Shikai a perfect defense and a devastating offense. He didn't just block her water attacks, his solar Ryutsu vaporized them on contact, surrounding them in a constant cloud of steam. He wasn't just fighting her, he was analyzing her, understanding her. He saw the way she fought, the fierce, protective instinct behind every blow. She wasn't fighting for conquest or destruction. She was fighting to defend her home, her people. Their swords locked, and they were face to face, surrounded by a swirling vortex of steam and spiritual pressure. "You fight to protect," Naruto said, his voice a low growl over the shriek of their combined power. "Just like me. Words are meaningless." Harribel shot back, pushing him away. "Only strength matters." She launched her most powerful attack, the Cascada, a massive, world-drowning torrent of water. It was a wave that could have washed away a city. Naruto stood his ground. He held Taiyogen in front of him and poured his energy into it. A massive Rasengan, larger and more stable than any he had created before, formed at the tip of his blade, a swirling sphere of pure solar energy. He met her wave not with an opposing force, but with a vortex that consumed it. The water was sucked into the spinning sphere and instantly vaporized, the resulting steam explosion blasting both of them backward. They landed 100 yards apart, both breathing heavily, their power still raging. It was a stalemate. And then, the world screamed. A soundless, psychic shriek echoed across the desert. From the sands between them, a host of hollows erupted. But these were not the scorpion-like creatures from before. These were malformed, twisted things, their bodies covered in the same gray, acking patches as the defeated lieutenants. Their eyes glowed with a cold, dead light, and they moved with a mindless, frenzied hunger, attacking everything in sight, Shinigami and Arankar alike. "What is this?" Mila Rose shouted, as she and the other Frakken were forced to defend themselves from the corrupted horde. "This is it," Naruto said, his eyes hard. "This is the enemy I told you about." A massive, corrupted hollow lunged at Harribel's back while she was distracted. Without a second thought, Naruto flash-stepped in front of her, taking the blow himself. His arm was deeply gashed, the wound immediately turning a sickly gray. He ignored it, spinning around and obliterating the creature with a blast of golden Ryutsu from his palm. Harribel stared at him, then at the corrupted hollows attacking her own Frakken. One of them had cornered a wounded Apache. Before Harribel could move, Naruto was there, a golden shield between the predator and its prey. He dispatched the creature, then turned, offering a hand to the stunned Arankar. His actions spoke louder than any words. He had defended her. He had protected her people. Forced into an impromptu alliance, they fought back to back, their powers complementing each other. Her control over water and his mastery of solar energy created a devastating combination of steam explosions and scalding torrents. They cut a swath through the mindless horde. Their movements synchronized, their wills aligned against a common foe. When the last corrupted hollow dissolved into gray dust, a heavy silence fell over the battlefield. Harribel looked at Naruto, at the still festering gray wound on his arm, a wound he took for her. She looked at her Frakken, all safe because of his intervention. She finally lowered her blade. "Your words have weight," she said, her voice clear and without hostility. The mask on her face seemed to recede slightly, revealing more of her determined expression. "I have seen this corruption before, in the far corners of my kingdom. I thought it a plague. I see now it is an invasion." She walked toward him. "You have proven your honor, Uzumaki Naruto. A truce is acceptable. For now." Her gaze then drifted past him, to a distant part of the desert where the fighting had been thickest. A strange structure was now visible, previously hidden beneath the sand. It was a massive, crystalline spire, obsidian black, pulsing with a cold, dead energy. It was eating the reishi from the atmosphere, and around its base, the sand was turning to the same gray dust as the corrupted hollows. A terraforming engine, Naruto said grimly. They aren't just invading. They're changing your world into something that can sustain them. Harribel stared at the spire, her eyes hardening with a cold fury. Her home was being poisoned. Naruto had not come as a conqueror, but as a harbinger. And he had brought with him the truth. This changes everything, she said. The Gote 13 and Hueco Mundo have a common enemy. She looked at him, a new respect in her eyes. My home is your home, Captain Uzumaki. While this shadow looms, we will face it together. The first ever alliance between a Shinigami captain and the Queen of Hueco Mundo had been forged. Not in a treaty room, but in the crucible of battle, sealed by a vow of mutual survival. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Serpent in the Garden. The Seraite was not a place that handled change well. It was an ancient institution, built on millennia of tradition, protocol, and a rigid caste system. Naruto's return from Hueco Mundo was not met with cheers, but with a cold, terrifying silence. The news of his unsanctioned mission and the subsequent pact with the Queen of Hollows spread through the Gote 13 like a virus. He wasn't arrested. Not immediately. To arrest a captain of Naruto's demonstrated power and growing popularity among the rank and file would have been a catastrophic political move. Instead, he was summoned. The summons was not to the 1st Division headquarters, but to the Pangan, the subterranean chambers of Central 46. It was a place where laws were written and sentences were passed, a sterile, soulless labyrinth from which few Shinigami returned with their careers or lives intact. Naruto walked the stark white corridors alone. Akaku and Yumichika had been confined to the 11th Division barracks, pending inquiry. The air was cold, still, and thick with the oppressive weight of unquestionable authority. The chamber itself was a vast, circular room. High above, concealed behind screens, sat the 40 sages and judges of Central 46, their voices disembodied, their faces unseen. Captain Uzumaki Naruto of the 11th Division, a dry, ancient voice echoed from above. You stand accused of gross insubordination, dereliction of duty, and fraternization with a declared enemy of the Soul Society. You traveled to Hueco Mundo without authorization. You engaged its leader, the Arancartier Harribel. You have, by your own admission, forged an alliance with this creature. How do you plead? Naruto stood in the center of the room, his captain's Haori a stark white beacon in the gloom. He didn't look afraid or intimidated. He looked annoyed. I plead not guilty, he said, his voice ringing with a confidence that bordered on sacrilege in this chamber. My actions were necessary to gather intelligence on an imminent, existential threat to the Soul Society. You speak of this Shokuzai, conspiracy, another voice, sharp and dismissive, cut in. A convenient fabrication to justify your reckless adventure. You present no evidence, only the word of a hollow and your own fantastic tale. The evidence was the regent who killed Captain Kenzuki. Naruto shot back, his voice rising. It was the army of corrupted hollows we fought in Hueco Mundo. It's the giant, energy-sucking crystal spire they are building in the desert to poison an entire world. My evidence is out there, but you won't see it if you're too busy hiding down here reading your dusty old law books. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. No one spoke to Central 46 like that. It was unthinkable. Your arrogance is astounding, Captain Uzumaki, the first voice said. Its tone dangerously cold. You are a child playing with powers you do not comprehend. Your emotional, undisciplined nature is a threat to the very order we strive to maintain. We will take your plea under advisement. Until a verdict is reached, you will be confined to your division, stripped of all command authority. You are a captain in name only. This hearing is concluded. Naruto was escorted from the chamber. Not by guards, but by the sheer, crushing weight of their judgment. He was a pariah, a king confined to his own castle. The Seraite became a minefield. The other captains were divided. Shunsui and Yukitaki, his original supporters, were cautiously supportive but hamstrung by the political firestorm. Soi Fan of the 2nd Division and the Onmitsukido made her distrust for him public, viewing him as a traitor whose actions spat on the memory of every Shinigami ever killed by a hollow. Byakuya Kuchiki remained aloof, his noble pride finding Naruto's entire existence distasteful. Kenpachi Zaraki just thought the whole thing was boring and kept demanding a real fight. The serpent had begun to whisper in the garden. The most vocal and dangerous of his oppo. Nence was Captain Sume Inagu of Squad 2, who had taken over the Onmitsukido after Yoruichi's departure. Inagu was a man born of the highest nobility, a purist who believed that the strength of the Seoul society lay in its unyielding traditions and the purity of its noble bloodlines. He saw Naruto, an outsider of unknown origin with monstrous, unrefined power, as a cancer. In a tense, informal gathering of captains in Yamamoto's chambers, Inagu led the prosecution. "He is a disgrace," Inagu said, his voice a silken, venomous whisper. "He was a handsome man, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He consorts with our mortal enemies. He ignores centuries of protocol. His power is a fluke of nature, not the result of discipline and breeding. He weakens us. His presence encourages dissent and rebellion among the lower classes." Quote, "His presence also won us a powerful, if temporary, ally against a foe that took down Kenzuki like he was a child," Shunsui countered, fanning himself lazily, though his eyes were sharp. "Seems like a good trade to me. An alliance with filth," Inagu spat. "It is a stain on our honor. Captain Commander, I implore you. He must be made an example of. Strip him of his rank. Imprison him. Show the Gote 13 that our laws are not mere suggestions." Naruto, who was required to be present but forbidden from speaking, could only stand there and take it, his fists clenched at his sides. He felt the weight of their gazes, the suspicion, the fear. While the political battle raged in the open, a clandestine one was being fought in the shadows. Yoruichi, moving like a ghost through the noble houses and intelligence networks she had once commanded, was working to unravel the conspiracy against him. "It's not just politics, Naruto," she told him during a Sector-Ed meeting in the abandoned Urahara-built training cavern beneath the Sokyoku Hill. "This is a coordinated effort. Records of your academy performance are being re-evaluated. Testimonies from your graduation exam are being re-examined. They're building a case, brick by brick, to paint you as a dangerously unstable entity that was mistakenly promoted. Let them," Naruto growled, slamming his fist into the cavern wall. "Cracking the stone. I'll just have to prove them wrong on the battlefield. That's what they want," Yoruichi snapped, her golden eyes flashing. "They want to provoke you. They want you to do something rash. To lose your temper, to prove their point. You have to be smarter than them." Rangiku, meanwhile, was fighting a different kind of war. She worked the barracks and the mess halls. Her natural charisma and popularity a potent weapon. She talked to the rank and file, the seated officers and the nameless Shinigami of every squad. She reminded them that it was Naruto who had stood alone against the regent. It was Naruto who had avenged a captain and protected Karakura town. She cultivated a groundswell of popular support for the hero of Karakura, turning public opinion into a shield that even Central 46 couldn't easily break. "They're scared of you, you know," she told him one evening, sharing a bottle of sake in his quiet office. The bottle was a gift from Captain Yukitaki. A small gesture of solidarity. "The old guard. You're everything they're not. You don't care about bloodlines or politics. You just care about protecting people. It terrifies them because they can't control it." She smiled, a little sadly. "It's why the rest of us believe in you." The serpent, Captain Inagu, was more than just a political rival. He was the head of a secret faction within the Seraite. A group of purists who had been contacted by the Shokuzai. They hadn't been told the full truth, of course. They'd been fed a lie. A charismatic agent of Kagero, the Abyssal Sovereign, had appeared to them. Cloaked in an illusion of a powerful, ancient Shinigami. This agent had promised them a purification, a culling of the weak and a restoration of the Soul Society to its former glory. With the noble houses returned to their rightful, absolute power. All they had to do was help pave the way, to remove the obstacles. Obstacle number 1 was Uzumaki Naruto. Inagu knew, he couldn't defeat Naruto in a direct confrontation. The man's Bankai was a weapon of mass destruction, and his one-on-one combat prowess was now legendary. But a captain, even a powerful one, could be vulnerable. Especially when isolated. The plan was set for the night of the new moon, when the Seraite was at its darkest. Naruto was in his quarters, meditating. He wasn't trying to find inner peace, he was trying to listen. He'd been trying to commune with Taiyogen, to understand more about his own power, about the golden light that resisted the regent's unraveling touch. But his mind was a storm of frustration and anger. He felt caged, his power useless. A faint sound broke his concentration. A flicker of movement in the shadows of his courtyard. His senses, honed by 1,000 ambushes, screamed. He didn't move. He slowed his breathing, calming his spiritual presence until it was a low, barely there ember. He waited. The attack was silent, swift, and overwhelming. 10 figures dropped from the rooftops into his courtyard. Their movements perfectly synchronized. They were members of the Onmitsukido, Squad 2's elite stealth force, clad in black, their faces hidden by masks. They moved without a whisper. Their spiritual signatures suppressed to almost nothing. This wasn't a challenge or a duel. This was an assassination. They struck simultaneously from all directions, their blades short, wicked, and coated in a fast-acting neurotoxin developed by Mayuri Kuretsuchi, capable of paralyzing even a captain-level Shinigami in seconds. They were fast, but Naruto was faster. The moment they moved to strike, he exploded. His suppressed Ryutsu detonated outwards in a golden shockwave, not powerful enough to damage the barracks, but more than enough to throw their precise, synchronized attack into chaos. The assassins, expecting a stationary target, were blasted back, their formations broken. Naruto was no longer in the center of the room. He was a golden blur, moving between them. This wasn't a battle, it was a purge. He couldn't use his wide-area attacks, not here, not in his own barracks with his squad members sleeping nearby. He relied on pure, unadulterated Hakuda. He disarmed the first assassin with a brutal twist of the wrist, shattering the bone, and drove an elbow into the man's throat. He spun, catching a blade meant for his back on his forearm. His skin, reinforced with a thin layer of condensed Ryutsu, was as hard as steel. He grabbed the assassin's head and slammed it into the ground. 2 more came at him. He dropped low, sweeping their legs out from under them, then delivered a devastating axe kick to the chest of one and a palm strike to the chin of the other, knocking them both unconscious before they hit the ground. He moved like a dancer and a demon, a whirlwind of precise, economical violence. It was over in less than 10 seconds. 10 of the Gote 13's most elite assassins lay broken and unconscious on his courtyard floor. He stood in the center of the carnage, his breathing steady, his eyes blazing. Was that all? He called out to the darkness. A slow clap echoed from the shadows of the courtyard gate. Captain Inigo stepped into the moonlight, his face a mask of cool appreciation. He was alone. Magnificent, Inigo said, his voice dripping with condescending praise. Truly, the raw power of a wild beast. You see, this is what I was talking about. No finesse, no artistry, just brute, overwhelming force. You sent your men to murder me in my own home, Inigo, Naruto growled, his voice a low rumble. This isn't about my finesse anymore. On the contrary, Inigo smiled, drawing his own Zanpakuto. It was a slender, elegant blade, a reflection of its master. This is a sanctioned execution. You were tried by Central 46 and found guilty. I am merely the hand of judgment. You're a liar, Naruto stated flatly. He could feel it, the cold, reptilian intent behind Inigo's eyes. This wasn't justice. This was a political assassination dressed up in the robes of law. So be it, Inigo sighed dramatically. Venomous fang, Dokuga. His blade shimmered and transformed, not into a large, imposing weapon, but into something more subtle and sinister. It became a whip sword, a series of razor-sharp, interlocking segments that could extend and retract at his will, dripping with a purple, corrosive poison. This poison can dissolve Kido and rot spiritual flesh. Even your monstrous Ryutsu cannot heal what has been rotted away to nothing. It is the perfect weapon to put down a mad dog. Inigo lashed out. The whip SWO road shot across the courtyard like a striking serpent. Naruto didn't try to block it. He flash-stepped to the side, the venomous blade cracking the stone where he'd been standing. The fight was a claustrophobic, deadly affair. Inigo was a master of ranged combat, using the unpredictable movement of his whip to create a cage of poisoned steel around Naruto. Naruto, unable to use his larger techniques, was forced to rely on pure speed and instinct, dodging and weaving through the storm of attacks, the poison tip of the whip missing him by inches time and time again. You are fast, I grant you that, Inoue hissed. His attacks growing faster, more frantic. But you cannot dodge forever. He fainted high, then sent the whip lashing low, aiming to wrap around Naruto's legs. Naruto didn't dodge, he jumped, landing on the whip itself. It was an act of impossible balance and timing. He ran along the length of the extending blade, closing the distance to a stunned Inoue in a split second. Inoue's eyes widened in panic. His weapon was designed to keep enemies at a distance. He had no defense for this. Naruto was on him. He didn't use a weapon. He grabbed the front of Inoue's pristine uniform, lifted the slider man off his feet, and slammed him into the courtyard wall with enough force to shatter the timber and stone behind him. Inoue gasped, the wind knocked out of him, his whip sword clattering to the ground. Naruto's hand was around his throat, his golden ryutsu now flaring, hot and furious. Who sent you? Naruto demanded, his voice a low growl. This isn't about politics. This isn't about tradition. Who are you working for? Inoue coughed, a smug, bloody grin spreading across his face. You are too late. The purification is already. His words were cut off as a spasm racked his body. He cried out, a sound of pure terror and agony. A black, crystalline pattern, like frost, spread rapidly across his skin, starting from his chest. It was the same energy signature Naruto had felt from the Regent. The atonement claims all debts. Inoue choked out, his body beginning to flake away into the same gray, lifeless dust. Naruto released him in shock, stepping back. Inoue was being silenced. A failsafe. Before he crumbled completely, Inoue's terrified eyes locked on Naruto's. He knows, the sovereign knows, what you are, a false son, in a dying world. And then he was gone. A pile of dust that scattered in the night breeze, his Zanpakuto dissolving alongside him. Naruto stood in the silent courtyard, surrounded by unconscious assassins and the lingering dust of a traitorous captain. He had won the fight, but the implications were chilling. The enemy wasn't just at the gates. They were inside the walls. They were wearing Captain's Howry. They were whispering in the ears of the powerful. Lights began to flicker on across the 11th Division barracks as the commotion was finally noticed. Doors were thrown open. Akaku, Yumichika, and a half-dozen other officers came running, swords drawn, skidding to a halt at the scene of carnage and the overwhelming display of their captain's power. Naruto didn't look at them. He looked up at the black sky, his mind racing. The infiltration phase was over. The serpent had been exposed, but not before it had poisoned the garden. War was no longer a distant threat on a foreign shore. It was here, and it had just begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Sundered Throne. The death of a captain at the hands of another, even a traitor, should have bogged the Seraite down in weeks of inquiries and political maneuvering. They did not have weeks. They barely had hours. The emergency sirens began to wail before the Kido Corps had finished sealing the evidence of Inoue's demise. It wasn't the high, piercing alarm for a hollow incursion, nor the rhythmic toll for an internal security breach. This was a sound no living Shinigami had ever heard outside of historical recordings, the Kyokujitai, the Doomsday Protocol. It was a deep, gut-wrenching groan that seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the Seraite, a sound reserved for one eventuality, a direct assault on the Soul King's palace. Naruto didn't wait for orders. He was already moving, his voice a thunderous boom that cut through the rising panic in his barracks. Squad 11, to me. This is not a drill. Arm yourselves for war. His squad, ALR, Edie on edge from the assassination attempt, responded with a ferocious, unified roar. The doubt and suspicion had been burned away by Inoue's betrayal. Their captain had been right. The enemy was real. The pack was loyal, and their alpha had been vindicated. He met the other captains at the base of Sokyoku Hill. The sight that greeted them was impossible. The sky was not just dark, it was tearing. Not like a garganta, a raw hole punched into reality. This was more horrific. The very fabric of the sky was fraying, splitting open in jagged, geometric cracks from which no light escaped. It was as if the world were a pane of glass, and something on the other side was hammering its way through. From these cracks, they came. The Shokuzai warriors were not a shambling horde. They were a silent, disciplined army. Clad in obsidian armor that seemed to drink the light, they moved with an eerie, synchronized grace. They had no faces, only smooth, featureless helms from which a cold, dead light emanated. They carried weapons of the same light-devouring material, long, serrated blades, cruel-looking polearms, and heavy, bladed shields. Their ryutsu was a collective void, a chilling absence de chi felt more terrifying than any malevolent pressure. They didn't descend or fly. They simply stepped out of the cracks in the sky onto the air itself, as if it were solid ground. And then, they attacked. War erupted across the entire Seraite. The Shokuzai were devastatingly effective. Their weapons didn't just cut, they unraveled. A Shinigami who took a glancing blow from a Shokuzai blade wouldn't just bleed. The edges of the wound would turn to gray dust, the unraveling effect spreading like a disease. Kido spells dissolved before they could even connect, their energy deconstructed in midair by the warrior's passive. Entropic aura, the Gote 13, for all its power, was thrown into chaos. Their tactics were useless. Zanjutsu duels became a death sentence. Kido barrages were futile. This wasn't a battle, it was a struggle against a force that operated on a different set of physical laws. They are immune to conventional attacks. Mayuri Kuretsuchi shrieked over the communication channels. A manic glee in his voice despite the carnage. Their armor is not matter, but a form of stabilized anti-reishi. It actively negates spiritual energy. Oh, the data is exquisite. Captain Kenpachi. Zaraki was a whirlwind of joyous destruction, his immense spiritual pressure the only thing raw and potent enough to brute force his way through the enemy's defenses, his blade tearing through the obsidian armor by sheer physics-defying force. But even he was being bogged down, surrounded by hundreds of the silent warriors. All captains, establish defensive perimeters. Yamamoto's voice boomed across the Seraite, laced with a fury Naruto had never heard before. The captain commander was a pillar of fire in the distance, his Shikai, Ryujin Jaka, turning entire platoons of Shokuzai into ash. But more just kept pouring from the sky. Naruto, at the head of the 11th Division, was a golden comet in the sea of chaos. Don't fight them head-on. He roared to his squad. Use Hakuda. Break their bodies before they can break your blades. Overwhelm them with force. He led by example. He didn't draw Taiyogen. He plunged into the thickest concentration of Shokuzai, his fists and feet wreathed in a thick layer of golden condensed ryutsu. He was a living battering ram. He didn't try to cut them. He shattered them. His punches broke through their light-eating armor, the raw, creative energy of his soul a direct counter to their entropic nature. For every warrior he destroyed, two more would take its place, their silent advance utterly relentless. Suddenly, the sky tore open again, but this was different. These were the jagged, chaotic rips of Gargantus. From them poured an army of Arankar, led by the regal figure of Tear Harribel, her Fracken at her side. The Queen of Hawako Mundo honors her pact. Harribel's voice cut through the din. She and her army slammed into the Shokuzai's flank, her powerful Seros and water-based attacks providing a much-needed reprieve for the beleaguered Shinigami. The Arankar's regenerative abilities made them slightly more resilient to the Shokuzai's unraveling attacks, and their raw power helped to even the odds. A cheer went up from the Shinigami ranks. The sight of their oldest enemy fighting alongside them was a mind-altering spectacle, but no one had time to question it. Naruto caught Harribel's eye across the battlefield. She gave him a curt, sharp nod. The alliance was real. The truce was now a brotherhood of arms. Captain Uzumaki. A voice called. It was Yoruichi, appearing at his side, her fighting clothes singed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. With her was Rangiku, her Shikai, Hineka, turning a group of warriors into a cloud of deadly ash. They're not the main objective, Yoruichi said, her voice grim. This army, it's a distraction. What are you talking about? Naruto asked, smashing a Shokuzai warrior with a spinning kick. Look, Rangiku pointed towards the center of the Seraite. One of the cracks in the sky was different. It was larger, more stable, and it was positioned directly over the path to the Soul King's palace. And from it, a presence was descending. A presence of such immense, ancient, cold that it made the regent feel like a pleasant memory. It was Kagero, the abyssal sovereign. He was not clad in armor. He was humanoid, his skin the color of polished jet, his hair a flowing river of pure white. His eyes were not eyes, but miniature black holes, pulling in the light around them. He wore simple, elegant black robes that seemed woven from the space between stars. He didn't radiate power, he was a sinkhole of it, his very existence a drain on the world around him. He's heading for the royal palace, Yoruichi realized with horror. If he reaches the Soul King. He's not going to, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. He looked at the three powerful women at his side. Yoruichi, the flash of lightning. Rangiku, the storm of ash. Harribel, the tide of the ocean. They were his allies, his friends, his family, the anchors of his new world. The four of us, he said, were going to stop him. Now, they became a spear tip, an elite strike team aimed at the heart of the invasion. They didn't fight the army, they blew past it. Naruto took the lead, a golden battering ram, clearing a path. Yoruichi, with her godlike speed, ran interference, disorienting Shokuzai squadrons before they could react. Rangiku's Heineka created massive defensive screens of ash, shielding their advance. Harribel unleashed overwhelming Seros, blasting holes in the enemy lines for them to surge through. They fought their way across the war-torn landscape of the Seraite, a blur of gold, black, purple, and teal, and finally broke through the main enemy lines, arriving at the base of the massive staircase leading to the heavens. Kagero was there, waiting for them, his back to the celestial stairway. Uzumaki Naruto, the sovereign's voice was not a sound, but a vibration in the soul, a melody of absolute zero. The false sun, the anomaly. I have been watching you. Your energy is a curious paradox. A loud, bright defiance against the inevitable silence. I've had enough of you nihilistic creeps and your speeches about endings, Naruto snarled. Whatever you're planning, it stops here. Stops. Kagero tilted his head, a gesture of almost pitying curiosity. Child of prophecy from a dead world. You misunderstand my purpose. I am not here to destroy. I am here to heal. The Soul King committed a cosmic sin when he sundered the primordial chaos into three separate, suffering worlds. He trapped all of existence in a pointless cycle of pain, struggle, and reincarnation. I am here to grant the mercy of reunion. I will consume him, absorb his power as the linchpin, and allow the three worlds to collapse back into the beautiful, peaceful chaos from which they were born. It is an atonement. You call destroying three worlds peace. Rangiku spat, her Ryutsu flaring. What is peace, if not an end to struggle? Kagero countered. Your lives are a flicker of temporary warmth in an eternity of cold. I offer a return to the whole. A final, perfect equilibrium. Enough talk, Harribel said, raising her blade. Let us see if your philosophy can withstand our conviction. The four of them attacked at once. It was a perfectly coordinated assault by four captain-class warriors. Yoruichi struck first, her speed a weapon, aiming for his neck with a blade coated in high-density Keto. Rangiku's ash cloud swirled, trying to blind and suffocate him. Harribel unleashed a massive blade of water. Naruto came last, a blur of gold, Taiyogan aimed directly at his heart. Kagero didn't move, he simply raised one hand. A sphere of absolute nothingness, a perfect black hole no larger than a fist, appeared in his palm. Yoruichi's attack, Rangiku's ash, Harribel's water, Naruto's blade, all of it was sucked into the sphere and vanished without a trace. Your energy is a child's tantrum, Kagero said calmly. I am its absence. The sphere vanished, and he counterattacked. He didn't move with Sonito or Shunpo. He simply was. One moment he was in front of them, the next he was behind Rangiku. His hand outstretched. Naruto's senses screamed. He moved on pure instinct, shoving Rangiku out of the way and taking the blow himself. Kagero's fingers tapped his shoulder. It was not the regent's unraveling touch. It was worse. It was a wave of pure, conceptual negation. Naruto felt not pain, but an absolute cold, a feeling of his own existence being questioned. His Bankai, which he had been about to unleash, faltered. The golden energy around him flickered violently. He was thrown back, crashing to the ground, a patch of his Shinigami uniform and the skin beneath it gone, not unraveled to dust, but simply erased from existence. Naruto! Rangiku screamed, her face pale with terror. Yoruichi and Harribel redoubled their assault, a furious storm of speed and power, but it was useless. Kagero moved through their attacks like a ghost, his every touch erasing small pieces of their world, a chunk of Harribel's sword, a piece of the ground beneath Yoruichi's feet. The power difference was not a gap. It was a chasm. He wasn't just stronger. He operated on a different plane of reality. Your bonds, your emotions, Kagero's voice echoed as he effortlessly parried a blow from Harribel. They are the source of your pain. Your attachments are the anchors of your suffering. Allow me to free you. He turned his attention to Rangiku, who was rushing to Naruto's side. He raised his hand, and a sliver of pure void, a blade of nothingness, shot towards her. Naruto's eyes widened. He couldn't get there in time. Rangiku, her face a mask of defiance, raised her own sword, knowing it was futile. A gentle figure appeared in front of her. Captain Jashiro Yukitake, his face serene, his usual sickly pallor replaced by a strange, ethereal glow. Do not weep for the flower that falls, Yukitake said. His voice soft but strong. He spread his arms wide. Weep for the bud that never had a chance to bloom. You all are the buds of a new era. He had removed the Mimihagi charm from his body. The right hand of the Soul King, the avatar of stagnation that had kept him alive for centuries, was now free. But Yukitake wasn't using its power to stop Kagero. He was using his own life force, his own soul. In a final, desperate gambit. Bankai, he whispered, a word no one had ever heard him speak. Sogyo no Kotowari, Ruo no Inochi. Truth of Pisces. The Dragon King's life. His twin blades did not change. Instead, his own body became the Bankai. His soul, his life force, his very existence, transformed into a massive, swirling torrent of pure, selfless energy. It was not an attack. It was a shield, a concept. It was the idea of sacrifice, made manifest. It slammed into Kagero's blade of nothingness, not to destroy it, but to absorb it, to redirect the concept of ending into himself. For a breathtaking moment, the two concepts, Kagero's nothingness and Yukitake's sacrifice, warred. The world twisted around them. An intriguing gambit, Kagero noted, his voice holding the first trace of annoyance. You are attempting to use the narrative weight of your own death to create a metaphysical barrier. A noble, but ultimately fleeting gesture. Yukitake's form began to fade, his sacrifice buying them precious seconds. His last look was to his oldest friend, Shunsui, who was watching from a distance, his face a grim mask, his one visible eye wide with sorrow. Then, Yukitake was gone. But his sacrifice lingered, a shimmering wall of spiritual law that momentarily halted Kagero's advance. The cost was immense. The battlefield fell silent. The Shinigami and Arankar alike stared in stunned grief. A beloved captain had just erased himself from existence to buy them a few heartbeats of time. Naruto struggled to his feet, his body screaming in protest from Kagero's touch, his heart a block of ice. Yukitake was gone. He had died for them. For him. Rage, cold and absolute, washed through him. It was a rage deeper than his fight with the regent, purer than his anger at Inoue. This was the fury of a man who had seen too many good people die for a better tomorrow. You, Naruto growled, his voice trembling with contained power. He looked at Kagero, his BLUE eyes shifting to the slitted crimson of his deepest rage. Bankai. The sun was born again. Kyubi no Kami, Taiyogen. The golden avatar of the nine-tailed fox erupted around him, larger, brighter, and more ferocious than ever before. Fueled by his grief and rage, the sheer force of its appearance shattered the last remnants of Yukitake's sacrificial barrier. But this time, Naruto didn't attack. He stood at the heart of his power. The nine tails of pure energy lashing behind him, his eyes locked on Kagero. He knew a direct assault was useless. Kagero was a concept. You couldn't punch a concept. But maybe, you could challenge it. Kagero looked at him, at the raw, incandescent power that was a direct affront to his entire philosophy. You burn so brightly before your end, the sovereign observed. But your light will be consumed, just like all the others. Naruto grinned, a feral, broken, and terrifying thing. Come and try, he challenged. The chapter ended on that precipice. The Gote 13 was shattered. A hero had fallen. The path to the Soul King was open, blocked only by a grieving, raging demigod and his three warrior queens, facing an enemy who was not a person, but an ending. The sundered throne of the heavens was at stake, and the final battle was about to begin. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sun's Vow. The battlefield was a ruin of grief and defiance. The war raging acro. SS the Seraite seemed to hold its breath, the cacophony of 1,000 duels fading to a distant roar. All eyes, all senses, were fixed on the confrontation at the foot of the heavens. A god of nothing. NG Ness stood before a god of incandescent rage, the fate of 3 worlds hanging between them. Naruto, cloaked in the divine mantle of his Bankai, was a star of pure, golden fury. The 9-tailed god avatar moved as he moved, a colossal extension of his will, its 9 tails whipping through the air with the force of hurricanes. The ground beneath his feet was scorched to glass, and the air around him shimmered with a heat that was more than physical. It was the heat of a soul burning at its absolute limit. Kagero watched him, his black hole eyes betraying no emotion. Grief is a powerful catalyst. The sovereign's voice echoed in their minds, a calm sea beneath Naruto's raging storm. It gives your fire a fleeting, beautiful intensity. But all fires consume their fuel. You are burning yourself away for a world that is already dead. This world is alive, Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by his avatar. It's alive with love, and friendship, and sacrifice. Things a hollow shell like you would never understand. He didn't charge. He had learned from his last disastrous attack. Brute force was useless. He needed to fight Kagero not on a physical plane, but on a conceptual one. His power wasn't just energy, it was life. It was creation. It was the antithesis of Kagero's existence. He extended a hand, and one of his 9 tails, a river of golden light, detached from his avatar. It didn't lash out. It flowed, transforming into a swarm of 1,000 golden birds that soared towards Kagero. They were not an attack. They were a message. Each bird was a sliver of Naruto's own memories, the taste of ramen shared with Iruka. The feeling of Sakura's fist connecting with his head, the weight of Sasuke's hand on his shoulder, the quiet strength in Hinata's eyes, the sound of his children's laughter. Memories from a life lost, but a life lived. You see only the pain of connection, Naruto's voice resonated. I'll show you its strength. The birds swarmed Kagero. They didn't strike him. They passed through him, and for the first time, the abyssal sovereign reacted. He flinched, not from pain, but from the sheer, overwhelming torrent of positive emotion, of connection, of life. It was a concept so alien to his nature that it was like a dissonant chord in his perfect, silent symphony. Meaningless sentiment, Kagero hissed, a flicker of genuine anger in his tone. He waved a hand, and a wave of absolute nothingness expanded from him, erasing the golden birds from existence. Your attachments are your weakness. No, a voice said, strong and clear. Yoruichi was at Naruto's side, her body crackling with lightning. They're his power. She looked at Naruto, a fierce pride in her eyes. And ours. Rangiku was on his other side, her Heineka swirling around her like a protective cloak. Her face set with grim determination. A few yards away, Harribel stood firm, her power a vast, deep ocean, her loyalty now absolute. They were his anchors. Kagero's gaze swept over them. The Flash, the Queen, the grieving lieutenant. You chain him to this world, to this cycle of suffering. I will grant you all release. He moved. He didn't attack Naruto directly. He targeted the others. He appeared before Harribel, his hand a blade of void aimed at her heart. Harribel met his attack, her blade intercepting his hand. My life is my own, she declared, her Ryutsu surging. It is a life I offer in service of my people, not one for you to erase. Her power, the power of a Vasto Lord Queen, pushed back against the void, a tide against an abyss. She was losing, her blade slowly dissolving, but she was fighting. At the same time, another Kagero, a perfect duplicate, appeared before Yoruichi, his movements a mirror of her own impossible speed. You worship speed, the duplicate whispered, the thrill of the moment. But all moments end. They engaged in a battle of pure celerity, a blur of black and purple, each of Yoruichi's lightning-fast strikes being negated a nanosecond before impact. A third Kagero materialized before Rangiku. You mourn a ghost, it said, its voice twisting into the likeness of Jin Ichimaru's. You cling to a memory. Let it go. It reached for her, and Rangiku, her eyes wide with fury and pain, met him with a storm of ash. Naruto watched, his heart pounding. Kagero wasn't just fighting them. He was dissecting them, attacking their philosophies, their very reasons for being. He was trying to prove his point, that their convictions were meaningless in the face of the ultimate end. And in that moment, Naruto understood. He couldn't just fight Kagero. He had to reach him. He closed his eyes, ignoring the three battles raging around him. He sank deep into himself, past the roaring furnace of his Bankai, past the echo of Kurama, to the very core of his soul. His power was the power of connection. It was how he had understood Kurama, how he had connected with the other tailed beasts, how he had felt the hearts of an entire army. He had never tried it on a being like Kagero. A being defined by its lack of connection. It's a long shot, he thought. But it's the only one I have. He reached out, not with his fists, but with his spirit. He pushed his own consciousness, his own soul, not at Kagero, but into him. He forced a link, a spiritual bridge into the cold, silent void of the sovereign's being. The backlash was agonizing. It felt like diving into a sunless ocean of absolute cold. He felt the crushing weight of eons of solitude, of a singular, unwavering purpose that had consumed all else. There was no joy, no pain, no love, no hate. There was only the mission, the atonement. But beneath it all, buried under galaxies of cold conviction, he found it. A flicker, the faintest, most ancient memory of a beginning. He saw not a monster, but a race, the Shokuzai. Born in the primordial chaos before the Soul King had forged order. They were beings of perfect equilibrium, of peaceful, mindless non-existence. And he saw their terror and pain when their chaos was ripped apart, when they were given individuality, consciousness, and the curse of purpose. They hadn't been born evil. They had been traumatized by the very act of creation. Kagero was the last survivor, the inheritor of his entire race's collective trauma and their dying wish, to undo the sin of their birth, to go home. He wasn't a villain. He was a refugee trying to unmake a world that had been built on the ashes of his own. The three Kagero duplicates flickered, their attacks faltering for a split second as Naruto's psychic intrusion struck their core. It was the only opening the three women needed. Harribel roared, unleashing her full power in a massive wave, forcing her opponent back. Yoruichi, using the moment of hesitation, landed a devastating blow. A full-power Shunko blast that cracked the duplicate's form. Rangiku, with tears of fury in her eyes, screamed, "You are not him," and engulfed her tormentor in a maelstrom of razor-sharp ash. The three duplicates shattered, dissolving back into the main body. Kagero stumbled back a step, his hand raised to his head, his black hole eyes fixed on Naruto. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice low. "Sing its perfect calm for the first time. What is this noise in my soul?" "It's called empathy," Naruto said, his eyes opening. They were no longer crimson. They were his own calm, determined blue. "I see you, Kagero. I see your pain." The golden avatar around Naruto began to change. It wasn't getting smaller or weaker. It was getting more refined, more focused. The monstrous, feral features of the nine-tailed fox softened, becoming more humanoid. The blinding, explosive light condensed, solidifying. The nine tails flowed back into him, not disappearing, but integrating. His Haori, which had been a silhouette, became visible again, but now it seemed woven from solid sunlight. The light of his Bankai was no longer a cloak he wore, it was radiating from his very skin. He had achieved a perfect, harmonious fusion of his own will, his Zanpakuto's soul, and his immense power. This wasn't just a Bankai. This was a state of being. This was the final form of the sun's vow. "Your atonement is just revenge," Naruto said, his voice now calm and clear, but resonating with the power of a star. "You want to destroy everything because you were hurt. I get it, I've been there. But destroying the present won't fix the past. All it does is erase the future." He raised a hand. "My vow isn't just to shine. It's a promise. A promise to protect the potential for a better tomorrow. A promise to protect the connections that give this flawed, messy, painful world its meaning. Your world is gone, Kagero. I'm sorry for that, but you will not take ours." He wasn't shouting. He was decreeing. His power was no longer just destructive force, it was conceptual. He was imposing his vow, his belief in connection and future, onto the fabric of reality itself, directly countering Kagero's power of ending. A false sun, Kagero whispered, his composure cracking, revealing the ancient, lonely being beneath. You offer them a false hope. A lie, maybe, Naruto admitted, but it's a lie worth fighting for. He moved. It wasn't a flash step. He simply closed the distance, his new form exuding an aura of absolute certainty that pushed back Kagero's void. The final battle was not a clash of swords or energy. It was a clash of philosophies. Kagero attacked with blades of nothingness, and Naruto met them with shields of solidified hope. Kagero tried to erase the ground beneath him, and Naruto's very presence reinforced it. His vow overriding the command to unexist. Kagero, for the first time in his eons-long existence, was being driven back. This is impossible, the sovereign roared, his form flickering. The end is absolute. Nothing can defy it. Everything defies it, Naruto said, his hand glowing with a concentrated, pure white light, a perfect fusion of his golden Ryutsu and the silver light of Taiyogen's soul. Every sunrise, every baby's first breath, every friend who stands by you when the world goes dark. Life defies it. We defy it. He thrust his hand forward. It wasn't a punch. It was an offering. He wasn't aiming to destroy Kagero, but to fulfill his deepest wish, though not in the way he intended. You want peace, Naruto said, his glowing hand touching Kagero's chest. You want an end to the struggle. Then have it. The technique wasn't a Rasengan or a Sero. It was something new, born of his unique nature. Taiyo no Fuin, seal of the sun. It did not destroy. It did not erase. It created. It spun a pocket dimension into existence, a universe of one. A perfect, silent, unchanging void. A world of absolute stillness, a flawless recreation of the primordial peace Kagero had lost. Kagero's eyes widened in understanding, and for a fleeting moment, the black holes of his eyes were replaced by something that looked like gratitude. Peace, he whispered. He did not crumble to dust. He was drawn into the seal, into the perfect, custom-made prison of his own deepest desire. He was not killed. He was retired from the story of the universe, given the eternal solitude he had craved. The seal, a complex, sun-like pattern, blazed on the ground for a moment, then faded. Kagero was gone. The cracks in the sky healed, leaving behind the familiar, placid sky of the Soul Society. The Shokuzai warriors, their sovereign and controlling intelligence gone, simply stopped. Then, like statues of salt in the rain, they dissolved into inert dust, their war over. Silence. Naruto's ultimate form receded, the light fading back into him. He stumbled, utterly drained, caught before he could fall by Yoruichi and Rangiku. Harribel stood guard over them, her blade ready. The war was over. Months later, the Seraite was still rebuilding. The scars on the landscape were healing, but the scars on their society were deeper. The old ways had been shattered. The Gote 13 was being reformed under the wise, weary leadership of the new Captain Commander, Shunsui Kyoraku. The alliance with Hawako Mundo, once an unthinkable heresy, was now a formal, if cautious, treaty. The old guard had crumbled. The new pillars of this era were forged in the fire of the Shokuzai War. And at the center of it all was the hero, the outsider, the man who had stared down the end of everything and refused to blink. The ceremony was not held in a grand hall or a public square. It was held in the quiet, rebuilt gardens of the 11th Division Barracks, a place that had come to symbolize Naruto's unconventional leadership. It was attended only by their closest friends, Shunsui, a recovering Akaku, and Yumachika, a tearfully happy Orihime Inoue who had helped heal the wounded, and a few other trusted captains and lieutenants. Naruto stood under a simple wooden archway. He wore not a captain's haori, but a simple, formal black kimono. He looked not at an army or a council, but at the three women who stood with him. Yoruichi, dazzling in a silken, backless purple gown, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief and a deep, abiding love. Rangiku, elegant and radiant in a flowing, cream-colored kimono. Her smile free of the shadows that had haunted it for so long. Cheer Harribel, regal and powerful in a pristine white dress that mirrored her Arankar uniform, her expression, for once, unguarded and soft. This wasn't a conqueror claiming his spoils. This was a man formalizing the family they had already become. In the custom of his old world, he had proposed, and in the custom of this new, blended world. They had all accepted. A Shinigami wedding was a simple affair, an exchange of vows and a shared cup of sake. Theirs was a bit more crowded. Shunsui, acting as the officiant, cleared his throat. Well, he said, a warm, genuine smile on his face. This is certainly a first. By the authority vested in me by a whole lot of paperwork, and by the bonds of friendship and respect that you've all forged in fire, I declare you, well, married. All four of you. Good luck with that. Laughter filled the garden. Naruto took the ceremonial sake cup. He took a sip, then passed it to Yoruichi. She drank and passed it to Rangiku. She drank and passed it to Harribel. When Harribel finished and passed the cup back to him, their hands touched. Their eyes met. A silent vow passed between the four of them. A promise stronger than any spoken words. Later that evening, the party had faded. The four of them sat on the veranda of Naruto's quarters, watching the single moon hang in the black sky of the Soul Society. A comfortable silence settled between them. Yoruichi leaned her head on his shoulder. You know, for a guy who started out as a big, dumb ball of energy, you clean up all right, sunshine. Hey, he protested, but there was no heat in it. Rangiku, sitting on his other side, refilled his sake cup. She's right, you know. You're still a knucklehead. But you're our knucklehead. Harribel sat opposite them, her posture still regal, but her eyes soft. In my world, she said, her voice quiet, the strong rule. But you have taught me that true strength is not the power to rule, but the will to protect. She looked at him, at the family they had formed, a fusion of Shinigami, Arankar, outcast noble, and a spirit who transcended it all. You are a worthy king, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto looked at the three incredible women around him, the pillars of his new life. He looked out at the peaceful Seraite, at the world he had fought for. The gnawing loneliness that had haunted him since his arrival was gone, replaced by a profound, grounding sense of peace. He hadn't gotten his old life back. He had built a new one. He raised his cup. To a better tomorrow, he said. They all raised their cups in unison. To us. The sun had set on an old era, but here, in this quiet garden, in the company of his impossible, beautiful family, a new one was just beginning to dawn. Chapter 7 End.